Good evening, gentlemen and experts, and Dr. Allen there, yes. Welcome. It is Wednesday. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do here. I'm Virginia Jones, and I want to welcome everybody to our meeting of waste management. I'm vice chair of this committee. I'm substituting right now because our chairperson, our supper has been delayed by a detour due to the flooding. So he will be here, and I will happily turn this over to him. Committee members are our separate chair, myself vice chair, Susan Corbett, Marlene Emmons, David Foyle on my right, John McMichael, and Louis Walter. Is there anybody online?
There's 2 viewers who haven't identified themselves.
Okay, so we have some people online. If you'd like to identify yourself. Anybody on the conference call? And this is a committee level meeting, so we do encourage participation. To the extent that if you would like to come up to the table, you're certainly welcome to do so. There are copies of handouts in front of you. Most of you look like you're returning participants, but there are copies of handouts and so forth on the tables outside. Please remember that the meetings are being recorded live. I have a terribly quiet voice. Can you hear me in the background? I'm used to the microphone. Okay. Tom cannot hear me, so I will speak louder for Tom. Meetings are being recorded live, so remember that, keep that in mind. When you speak, please state your name and affiliation before speaking. Also be reminded that idle chatter is picked up by the microphone. And I'm going to try to keep to agenda topics during the meeting. We do have a draft recommendation coming in, so we want to keep strictly to the time guidelines. There will be a public comment period where other comments can be heard. Anyone wishing to answer questions or address the CAB must come up to the podium to speak. Do we have a podium?
Yeah.
No, but right there is good. Right here.
If you kind of come up to the center. Everybody's been here before, so just come on down. This way you'll be close enough to the microphone where it can pick up your comments and questions. There is no public comment sign-up sheet. Okay, please remember everybody to sign in on the tables outside. Under committee purpose, we review the management, treatment, storage, and disposition of radioactive waste, including transuranic waste, low-level waste, mixed low-level waste, and radioactive liquid waste. And we provide advice and recommendations to DOE on these activities. Principal goals of the committee are to see a trend of reduction in the risks to the public, workers, and the environment posed by these wastes. And secondly, integrated and comprehensive systems approaches used in weighing SRS waste management and disposition options. We have under recommendations, we have no pending or open recommendations at this time, and we have one draft recommendation that we'll be discussing later. In response to, and DOE's response to recommendation 322 at each committee meeting, the respective DOE point of contact will provide a brief status update of ongoing SRS activities relevant to this committee's purpose. Expert James Ridley will be speaking as point of contact tonight. If you can hold questions, please.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm Jean Ridley. I'm the Director for Waste Disposition Programs Division at the Savannah Riverside. I'm with the Department of Energy, and our program covers all of your topics up there, from the low-level waste to the hazardous high waste. Okay, as Jenny said, I'm going to give you an update just on the liquid waste side of the house. Tank closures. As you know, we were grouting tanks 16, and I'm happy to report that that has been completed on September the 20th, meeting our regulatory milestone date ahead of schedule. We're now working on tank 12. The isolation of that tank has completed on schedule, and we now are in the process of getting ready to send out the closure module addendum. The public comment begins Monday and goes until November the 17th. A public meeting on that closure module will be held at the Aiken Design Center on Wednesday, November the 4th at 6 o'clock. Anyone would like to attend. Under tank closure cesium removal, DOE agreed to pursue commercial sources for tank waste treatment under an agreement reached with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control and EPA as part of the extension to the closure date extensions for those two tanks. As part of that, commercial sources sought, Savannah River Remediation sent out an expression of interest to industry. They received information from those vendors. They subsequently sent out a request for proposal, and those proposals were received on September the 12th, and Savannah River Remediation is currently evaluating those proposals. DOE will meet with South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control and the Environmental Protection Agency on October 15th. That was also agreed to in that agreement on the tank extension date, that we would meet with them on October the 15th to discuss the results of that market research. And we just want to make clear that these commercial sources sought to do this tank waste treatment does not impact salt waste processing facility at all. This is an interim step. The Defense Waste Processing Facility resumed operations the week of September the 7th under what they call a justification for continued operations, which is interim safety basis measure that allows them to resume operations under strictly controlled conditions. That's in response to the issue that you may have read in the paper about the antiphone. And DOE committed to come back to the full CAB board and give a presentation in the November timeframe on the antiphone issue. Currently, DWPF is now also in another outage. We have what we call the site-wide steam outage that affects all facilities on site. So we're currently in that outage. We expect to come out of that outage at the end of next week. So DWPF will resume, Saltstone will resume, actinide removal process. All of our facilities will resume when that steam outage completes. For the fiscal year, DWPF poured 93 canisters, bringing the total number to 3,970 canisters. We have poured more than 15 million pounds of glass, and this upcoming fiscal year, we should hit our 4,000th canister. As I stated, Saltstone is also in an outage. During this outage time, they are performing inspection and maintenance activities on the grout line, the pumps, the feed systems, etc. And as soon as the outage is over, they'll resume operations. The actinide removal project and the modular caustic solvent side extraction unit, I'm going to use an acronym, ARP-MCU for that. Again, we've already mentioned how well the next generation solvent is working in that process, getting basically 200 times more efficient than the old solvent was. We now achieve about 99.99% removal of the cesium. We recently processed a record of 261,975 gallons in a 31-day period. And for this past physical year, we processed 752,544 gallons. Total ARP-MCU has processed over 5 million gallons since they began in 2008. Saltstone disposal unit number 6, you're going to hear a presentation on that, so I won't talk too much on that. Just wanted you to know that the water tightness test that Carl will talk about during his presentation did start on Monday, and so far so good. The salt waste processing facility, the construction is approximately 89% complete. The construction is scheduled to complete in December of next year. And the contractor states they are currently ahead of schedule. The operation with the radioactive waste is expected to begin in early 2019. And that concludes my agency update. Any questions?
Thank you for the update. Couple of things, I think we have a couple of questions here. I know that report is extra work on you. I want you to know that we value and appreciate the work that you put into it. It was extremely detailed, and I listened to every word of it. I appreciate that the anti-foam thing that I talked with Sonia about, it's going to be picked up at the full board meeting. I thank you for that, and I congratulate you on one more tank down the road, and the other one started, and the public comment period is going to be advertised locally. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And it'll, it's also being carried on the internet. I think we have a couple of comments. David?
Yes, thank you. David Hoyle, CAB. Jean, you said that SDU 6 has started its water tightness test. Does that mean that they've started filling it, or it's full and they're now starting to watch it?
They're filling it as we speak.
Okay. And could you give us a status of the condition in the Saltstone disposal permit that required SWPF to start up October 31st, I believe?
Let me make sure I understand your question. You're asking what the language is in there, or what?
No, I know that there's a special requirement for SWPF to start up this year.
Correct.
And at our last meeting, DOE indicated that they had not yet formally requested an extension from the state of South Carolina regarding that condition in that permit. I'd like to know the status now.
Oh, okay. Now that I understand your question. DOE has met with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, I'll just say DHEC, twice. I'm trying to think, is it 2 or 3 times, to discuss the permit requirements. Currently, we're in, I'll call it negotiations with them on requesting either an extension or some period of consideration to talk about related milestones. DOE is approaching it with the intention of addressing just the SWPF delay. South Carolina Department of Environmental Control wants to talk about all milestones. So we're kind of discussing both with them right now. There is another meeting planned for this week, and we have offered a proposal to them. It's verbal. They have come back with some questions and, if you will, a counter position, and we have to evaluate that and then again meet and try to come to terms.
Can we put that as an item on the update report, because I know that's a continuing concern. We've had a question each time on that. I appreciate that.
Can you say what the proposal was from DOE and the counter from DHEC?
No, we can't.
No. Yeah, because, and the main reason, David, is because we have not, we have only started discussing this with DHEC. We have not brought in EPA yet. And EPA is a part, even though they're not part of the Saltstone permit where this resides, they are part of the regulatory milestones. And so it would be, it would not be,
You're talking about the FFA milestone.
correct.
I see.
So we don't want to talk to anyone else before we have a chance to talk with them. They have been told a little bit, but they haven't been part of these discussions with, back and forth discussions with DHEC at this point.
Okay,
Okay.
what was the deadline for startup of SWPF? That's in the Saltstone permit. What's the date? That was,
Is October, I think it's October 30th or 31st of
Okay.
2015.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, and we're gonna try to keep this part pretty short with it. Any other quick comments? Okay. And again, thank you for your update. Thank you for substituting. Tom, is it really quick?
Very quick. Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. Gene, you said that startup of SWPF was early 2019. Maybe I missed it, but I thought a late 2018 date was being presented earlier. Or...
Yeah, they say December 2018, looking at the schedule. They are anticipating introducing radioactive material late December of 2018, but physical operation is what I was talking about. It probably won't start until 2019. Does that clarify?
Sure.
Any other?
Thank you again. I let them ask questions because I was assured you were outstanding and you could handle any question that came up. Just want you to know that I had asked about that. So thank you. I want to move into our presentation next by Carl Lanigan. We'll be on Saltstone disposal. I'll be right back. I forgot a pen, so I'll be right back.
Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Saltstone disposal units, and we're going to give you a status today of Saltstone disposal unit number 6. I am the federal project director of this project and really all the Saltstone disposal unit projects in the future. Next slide, please. Today I want to give you a description of the disposal units, what their purpose are, how they link to the liquid waste system at the Savannah River site. In addition, I want to give you the current status, which you actually heard a little bit of number 6. Next slide. This is the DOE decoder ring. For those of you who want to learn DOE speak, I'll go to the next slide, please. I think a lot of you have seen this particular slide before. This is a graphic representation of the liquid waste program at the Savannah River site. For my part of this presentation, I want to focus on the type of waste streams we get during the Cold War weapon production. We had 2 different waste streams that came out of the canyon. One was a sludge, like a peanut butter thick sludge that came out, but the majority of the waste was in a salt form. The sludge had and is being sent to the defense waste processing facility that's mixed with borosilicate glass for vitrification, stored in glass canisters in the glass waste storage facility. The salt form of that waste is currently being processed for the acronyms removal process in a modular caustic unit to separate the majority of the neutralized, remaining neutralized in that particular waste stream. That's sent again to the defense waste process facility for vitrification and eventual storage in the geological repository. The decontaminated part of that process, we call decontaminated salt solution, is sent to the Saltstone production facility, mixed with grout. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then finally disposed of in a disposal cell, which is essentially my presentation today. Next slide, please. Now, the salt source production facility, this decontaminated salt solution, still has some residual radionuclides in it, so it's still considered a low-level waste. So that waste stream is sent to this facility, which is essentially a concrete mixing plant. So that liquid stream is mixed with a mixture of fly ash, cement, slag, and it's into a grout, when we call, but it's very, it's not like concrete, you're making a street out of it, it's very viscous, so we can actually pump that. When it's all mixed together, we pump that into a particular disposal cell. Originally it was small 4, and right now we're building a large tank, number 6. So that's what we do with the decontaminated salt stream. Next slide, please. 99% treated tank form waste will be in a form of low-level waste. So the majority of this waste, when we empty all the tanks at the Savannah River site, the majority of that waste is going to be in this low-level waste form, turn into this grout, which we call saltstone, and be disposed of on site. And that's a critical need to be able to get out of our aging tank farm and address that mission for the site. So my job is to build these disposal units with sufficient capacity and have them completed on time, that I do not stop the entire liquid waste program. So my job is to design and build these units, obviously with the help of the Savannah River remediation contractor, have enough buy-in so this structure of empty these waste tanks, decontaminating the salt form, and disposing that low-level waste. I have to be ready, right capacity, so I don't stop this very elaborate integrated program. Next slide. Now, the saltstone production facility was built in the late 80s, and at that time we were using these concrete rectangular structures to place that saltstone in. During the operation of those units, one of the things we learned, one of our lessons learned from this operation, that it was not a really good configuration to address a hydrostatic load. When we put this grout, even though it's very not that viscous, it does have a residue in these pipes. We transmit it from the cement plant, for lack of a better term, to these disposal facilities. There's a little bit of residue. So we flush these lines. We shoot what we know as a pig, is like a rubber ball, to flush that line out, and we do shoot water out. Now that water kind of remained in these disposal units and added an extra load that was not anticipated to this unit. So we learned that from this operation, and we went to a different design. Next slide. And that different design was a circular tank that has been still being used in the commercial work, for holding water, drinking water, wastewater, other processes. And we looked at these type of tanks. They're very robust regarding hydrostatic water level. So we thought this would be a better design to dispose of the saltstone. Even though saltstone will harden after about an hour, about a day during a processing run, there's still this water load that adds this pressure. We thought this would be a better way to go. Next slide. So in mid-2000s, we started building, and we had built 6 of what we call the saltstone disposal units. Now they're called the small cells. They had a volume of almost 3 million gallons. They're 150 feet diameter, about 22 feet high. And the reason we chose this particular diameter, because this saltstone grout can spread almost 75 feet. So if we put the grout in the center of the tank, it will essentially fill all the edges. It will only be one quote pour spout of the grout when we fill these tanks. So we built 6 of these units. Unit 2, we're doing in pairs. They are filled right now. 3 and 5, we call the 4-pack. Those are being filled. Now, when we design these things, what we do, we put a very thick polyethylene liner on the bottom of that. And one of the reasons that, on the unlikely event there is any kind of leak that may occur, it hits this, liner, and the bottom is slow. There's a slight slope to it. And an SDU 3A and 2 has a sump also, there's a detection sump. So if there's any, unlikely leak, it hits that liner, rolls off, flows down to a sump, but we have a warning that we take remedial action if necessary. In the unlikely event there is a leak. Also, we have grout markers. We have ability to measure inside how high we go up the concrete. These particular units, they were built, but we had cast in place walls. We would actually set forms up, cast the walls, let it set, and when we were done, we would actually lift them by a crane, surround the tank, and we just bolt in each of the different walls. Now, as I told you before, we do have, there is this water issue, but we like to get as much of the water out of the tank as we can, so that each of these units has a drainage system. Where on the walls, there's this fine mesh, where obviously there's still some fines in there. It separates the concrete fine from the water stream. It goes down into a collection system where it's pumped out and sent right back to the Saltstone production facility. So we don't lose that water, we reuse it. Now, one of the strengths about these particular circular units, and you'll see this particular slide where they're shooting, they actually can shoot concrete, they call it concrete. We wrap these tanks with multiple layers of steel wire. For this particular unit, it was like 128 miles of wire. So we would wrap it, shoot a layer of concrete, wrap it. And this gives us what we call pre-tensioning, pre-stressing the unit. This makes it a very, very strong tank to handle water pressure. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things that we do in the department, we're always looking for continuous process improvement. We want to make sure we have the best safety systems involved at the least cost to the taxpayer. So when we started looking at the next disposal unit, again, I have to keep ahead of a liquid waste program. The MCU ARP and eventually a solid waste processing facility will be starting up. So I got to get ahead of that game. We did a value engineering study and determined that, the industry builds these units, even though 3 million gallons sounds like a lot, they actually build them a lot larger. And we found that we build larger cells. Instead of building 72 cells, which we thought we needed to empty all of the high-level waste tanks, that we could build 7 larger cells, essentially 10 times larger than those existing units. So by going this route, we estimate we can have a projected life cycle savings after processing all the way to about $300 million. So this is what we chose for Saltstone disposal unit number 6. Next slide, please. This number 6 is based on this actively being used to take 2 of these units. These are sort of drinking water. They're very robust. They're 43 feet high, 375 feet in diameter. In addition to this shotcreting and wire wrapping, they also do what we call vertical wall tensioning, where we actually put bolts in the wall. We tighten those down. So not only is we got horizontal tightening, we got vertical tightening. This is a very strong, robust structure, and that's why we like this. So this is one we're used for. This is based on the design of Saltstone unit number 6. Next slide, please. Now, we talked a lot about the disposal cell, but obviously it has to connect and operate with the Saltstone production facility. So there's a number of systems we put on the top of these tanks or around the tanks to allow that to happen. Obviously, we have to connect to the grout line. You got to be able to set the Saltstone grout from the production facility and have a way to pump out the excess water when we do flushing back to the facility. We also have thermocouples, or essentially temperature monitoring. When grout sets or any concrete sets, it releases heat. And we don't want this to get you hot in there because we want the Saltstone to have a nice, robust, homogeneous nature. So we monitor temperature. If it gets too hot, we pull off on putting any more Saltstone in there. Also, this instrumentation needs power. We have cameras in there to monitor the health of that and watch the tank being filled. We have passive ventilation. Obviously, when you put the grout in there, you're displacing the air. The air has to go someplace since it is a low-level waste. We have HEPA filters we put on top. We do not want anything escaping into the atmosphere. So this is all called balance of plant. This is after we build it, the disposer, the concrete cell itself, this is the systems we put on so it can operate with the Saltstone production facility. Next slide, please. All right, status. As Gene said already, we have finished construction in September. The concrete has been set. We are started filling in September. We have now about probably at 1.5 million gallons of water. Right now, we're this is a 24/7 operation. It will take 20 days to fill this tank up with water. And this all is to test and to prove to ourselves that this is built as designed. It's a robust structure, will have no leaks. And in addition, what we do when the tank is full, we'll actually put a fluorescent dye. It's a biodegradable dye that allows us to give us added assurance that this disposal cell will not leak. Now, if there's a leak discovered, it's not the end of the world. Actually, some of the other ones, we detected small leaks. We go in there, we essentially inject high pressure epoxy, liquid epoxy. We fill those cracks. But this testing scenario we're going through right now gives us that added assurance that this will not leak during going to hot operations. So it takes 22 days to fill. We hold it for about a week. We go at night with our black lights. I'm sorry for the trick-or-treaters. This year we bought all the black lights in Aiken, so the kids can't use black lights during Halloween and Christmas. Everything tests out right, then it actually takes us 22 days to empty the tank. And it's discharged into our normal, we have sediment retention ponds. So we made sure we have a measured release back into the environment, that we're not upsetting the normal stream flows of any of the existing watershed. Next slide, please. Now, what I did was balance the plant. We are fabricating all the infrastructure as we speak. Now, I mentioned before that the smaller disposals, it was designed against the amount of flow the Saltstone grout would do. Obviously, 375 feet is a lot larger than 150 feet. So we're building multiple wells. We have multiple discharge points to put the grout in. I think we have 9 discharge points and 7 wells. And when we do flush the line, we'll go to these wells, it's down to the sump, and turn that water back. Now, since we were building a number of these disposal cells for the life of the liquid waste program, we're trying to find cost savings. We have to put electrical and instrumentation and monitoring the operation. So what we decided to do with SDU 6, that we built a portable mechanical and instrumentation substation, for lack of a better term. So this will be used to operate the cameras, the thermocouples, all the other kind of operations. But when SDU 6 is full, we can then pick it up and go to the next one. So we want to keep on buying additional electrical equipment. Since we'll be doing this for a number of years. Next slide, please. So the balance of plant right now, we're in large fabrication mode. All our thermocouples are done. We've tested the wells. Obviously, the wells will be used as we speak. All our fabrications, the tank top support, the grout line, they're done. The remaining fabrication, the drain water, these other units are over 50% done. So that is, we're progressing very well. Next slide. Now, when all the waste has been processed, it's a Savannah River, and all the saltstones you put in these disposal cells, the end state of the saltstone disposal facility, which is what I'm speaking of, we will actually put a landfill cap over that to add added protection of this level waste for the long term. Our goal is to keep water away from this waste form for the long term. So when everything's said and done, we'll have this engineer cap over there to prevent water infiltration. And as we build these, we put monitoring wells around disposal cells as for the unlikely case there's any leakage out of the tank, we can get indication there if there is, and then we can take remedial action if there's a potential problem. Next slide. So finally, the summary. This also disposal units is the final disposition of saltstone for this decontaminated salt solution. We went through a number of design levels to make sure we have the most safe, robust structure at the least cost for the taxpayers. We're about 70% complete for SDU 6. And again, when everything is processed in the tank farm, we will put a final engineer cap over for long-term disposition. Are there any questions?
Yeah, can you repeat all of that?
Welcome, Earl Shepherd, he's arrived, he's our chair. I had a question, and I don't understand the words to say, but my question is, you're filling the tanks with water.
Yes, right now for our test.
For the test. Okay, but to my conception, it's not the same density
That is
as
correct.
grout.
That is
So
correct.
this is not 100% predictive. That's,
Well, actually, it's a little more. It's more harsh.
okay, tell me more.
Okay. When we put in the saltstone, we'll go through I'll call it a batch. It is a grout mixture. We'll let the grout, we put the batch in 24 hours, that batch sets. There's no longer any stress on the walls. So yes, it is dense, but that little layer, let's say a foot, even though that tank has a lot of grout, you put a foot up. The design is based upon those lifts to ensure that it does not have any additional. So really, the stress for saltstone is very minimal because we do these lifts and it sets. Once it sets, the loading on the walls decreases immensely. Now with water,
What's a lift?
I'm sorry. When we're processing the decontaminated salt solution, we're going to pour thousands of gallons, a set amount of volume, let's say 40,000 gallons. We'll send that to the saltstone production facility. They put the cement, the fly ash, and then we pour that into the tank. So after 40,000 gallons, we stop because we want to flush the line, make sure everything's set, and then that saltstone is going to harden. So between for a 24-hour period, yes, there'll be some load against that wall, but it's only that particular, I call lift, like this kind of thickness against the wall, not the whole tank, but you're only having that kind of load. And after it sets, that load goes away. Now I want to tell you why water hydro testing is more important. These tanks are designed to handle an earthquake load. So you could imagine if you had an earthquake with a tank, 30 million gallons of water, it's going to bang against that wall. So this really, the seismic, we put 300 miles of seismic cabling around this unit and the vertical testing. So it's designed really to handle a higher load than the salt they'll ever see with saltstone grout. Yes, ma'am.
What, on the Richter scale, were you predicting when they designed the capacity of that tank?
It's a very good question. Unfortunately, I do not have my seismic man, but it's been designed against the earthquake load, the design load at the Savannah River site. So this has been the foundation, and we actually put additional reinforcing bars to address the particular seismic loading if we had such an event. So that was put in the design. I do not know that exact value. I know Mr. Michaelitis might know that. I'm not with that, but I don't know that value. This is a TC2, this is a ASCAT 2 facility.
Mike Michaelitis, Department of Energy. It's designed to withstand the Charleston earthquake, although it won't remain functional afterwards. There'll be substantive cracking, but it won't collapse. So,
And the Charleston earthquake is assumed because there was no measurement of it at the time. It was assumed to be a what, 7.3?
7.4, I believe it was in Charleston,
So that's
which
what these
equates,
tanks are designed to absorb.
a 7.2 earthquake in Charleston equates to, and this is, I'm being sloppy with engineering, so give me a break. It would be about the equivalent of a 5 point something or other if the epicenter was right here under the River 8. Because the shaking in Charleston dissipates the farther we get from the earthquake.
And that's, you know, we can continue this into public comment, but I think it's addressed the question. Any other questions? Okay.
Carl, you mentioned these were similar to the ones up in Syracuse, New York. Have they ever been built before and operated for a period of time, thanks to state?
These units are built all over the world. Actually, they build them larger. They're 40 million gallon tanks. These are the oil industry. This unit actually, the stressing machine came back from Saudi Arabia. Well, another thing we liked about this, that the Syracuse design, one of the design contractors actually partnered with SRS, so we actually got their design. And the subcontract vendor who built this is out of California, and if you're aware, they have a very, very strict seismic code. A lot of these things that we really like going this direction because the company knows how to build seismically. So, yes, they are being used all over the world. It's successful.
Your seismic is designed on the sloshing the liquid in there, right?
as amongst other things, I'm not a seismic, it's not slotchy, there's a lot of other motions that the full seismic spectrum was designed at. We didn't take the exact Syracuse design, because obviously Syracuse is not South Carolina. We went into design, as I mentioned before, we actually had to beef it up a little bit to meet our particular seismic standard. This is a hazard category 2 nuclear facility. So we put actually more rebar steel into the tank to address our particular seismic loading.
But when you're operating normally, the only time you're gonna have liquid in that tank is gonna be a nominal day or so while you're waiting for it to settle. So
Yes,
the odds of having the earthquake and the odds of it happening at the time the liquid in the tank is really low.
it's very unique, but, you know, our issue is to make sure we assure the safety of the public. It is a very robust tank, but you're correct. When we do a lift, we put a sulfur in it, then we're gonna take the liquid out. As much as we can back to the plant. So there will be very little liquid there but we have to design to the worst case. So we assume that it's an active foreign event. So we have to make sure this disposal cell is very robust and can handle our seismic events for this area.
An excellent presentation, Carl. Thank you for it. I have a number of questions. I can break them up if others have questions too. I'd like to take you to slide number 9, please. Is that 9? No.
Mine has, the center of it has the 4.
There we go. Oh, well, that's not 9.
One more.
It's just one, it's catching.
Oh, okay. That's it.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that SDU 3, and I think you also said 2, has a leak detection system.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean not all of the SDUs have leak detection?
Only when we got our permit in the state of South Carolina to construct these, the requirement was that each, this is trying to get an old memory back here, for a certain amount, and I don't know the number, I'll have to come back and visit it, a certain number of these disposal cells, we had to have one under a leak detection system. I hate to make a guess. I know that we put more in than was required. For 2 that's compare for SDU 1 and 2 has a leak detection. 3 and 5, those 4 you can test, only 1 has a leak detection system. And that was part of our permit with the state of South Carolina. That was their requirement.
And for those SDUs that have leak detection, have you detected any leaks?
We have a infiltration leak we have noticed on the SDU 3A. We've evaluated that, and it was right before we started operations. So we took a baseline there. There was no radionuclide, because there was no waste in there. And during operations, we keep monitoring that. And we have not seen any radionuclides in there. There was a lot of thoughts of what's going on. There was, I like to call this the burrito bag. We built this unit, we want to make sure water stays out of it, just during the operational phase of it. And that's kind of tied in the leak detection system. There's just some suspicion that there might be a tear in that particular burrito bag, since we usually detect this water during the large rain event. So right now, we do get the social production system does get an alarm. We'll see water in there. We go in there, analyze what's in there. There's been no radioactivity been identified, but we drain that system out.
Thank you. Does SDU 6 have a leak detection system?
There are 4 different sumps on that unit.
And you mentioned that epoxy is injected into the joints of the panels. Is the interior of SDU 6 coated with epoxy?
The Saltstone for the panels, this was, just want to clarify, this is from the Saltstone 2, 3, and 5. 6 is a different design. Though we still use epoxy, so your question is still valid. We did have 25 wall sections, and they were placed next to each other. However, that's still classified as a joint. So yes, we would inject epoxy in there. There is no coating in the tank regarding leak protection. I'm qualifying my words here. There's no, in the commercial world, they don't need to coat these tanks for drinking water or other systems unless they need to protect against something. We do have to protect against something due to the saltstone chemistry itself. In that decontaminated salt solution, there's a high sulfate amount in there. And according to the American Concrete Institute, if you have a sulfate level over, I believe the number is 10,000 parts per million, I have to protect the concrete. So after we do the water test, right now we're filling it up, I want to make sure everything doesn't leak, then yes, we are going to put a coating in there to protect the concrete only during the operational phase before it sets up against the sulfate, this high sulfate amount that does exist in the saltstone matrix.
Really? You're going to put the coating on after the water test?
This gives me added assurance. One of the problems we had, we did test the other units with the coating on. All these units have a coating on it. When we filled up one of the units, we did have a leak. The problem when you have a leak, you empty it, where's that leak coming from? If you've coated the wall. So for this unit, I wanted them to test it without the liner, because the liner is not used for watertightness. It's the concrete itself that's that. So in the unfortunate event, or if there is a crack, it'd be easier to find.
Okay, I understand.
So I can check that box and fix it. So it just gives me added assurance. It saves us time and money. If there does have a leak in there, it'd be easier to find.
Okay, but after you do the water test, you're going to have high humidity inside the tank. How are you going to coat the walls with epoxy with a wet wall?
We have contracted with an outfit that does this for a living. We're going to be putting heating systems for about 2 weeks to get all the humidity out of it. So it's like a 2-week operation to do that. Very good point, because there is a specification we have to meet. But they've done, there are vendors out there that do this for a living who contracted with them to do it.
Okay, I'd like to move to slide 10, please. The picture on the right shows, existing and planned SDUs. Can you tell me of the existing SDUs, which ones are still in active operation?
Active operation. This is SDU 2. SDUs 3 and 5. 3 and 5 are in the process. They're still active, and they are being built. As when told, right now we're out, as Gene mentioned before, right now not being built today, but these are in the process of being built. These are all these in construction. The rectangular bolts right now are not, we don't have any particular plans to use those right now.
Okay, let me probe there a little more. The rectangular vaults still could receive waste if you wanted to?
If right now we don't have any plans to, since we have a more robust structure that we're using. It is safer, it doesn't have any design concerns we had with the rectangular vaults. Right now we have no plans right now.
But you could if you wanted to. They're not closed.
This is Jean Ridley, with the Department of Energy. We have agreed with South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control that we would not add any more material to the rectangular vault.
Okay, well, that's pretty final.
No, go ahead.
All right, I got a little confused because some of your slides seem to indicate that SDU 6 is now completed in construction and under testing, and then some of the other slides said it's 70% complete. Which one is true?
Proposal cell, the concrete tank is complete. The balance of plant that connects the cell.
Okay.
It's done.
Okay. When do you plan to build the next one?
We trying to we've submitted requests to Congress to start either FY16 or 17. We're in a continuing resolution, so right now I can't.
I understand how that works. In your water test, do you fill the tank to the top?
Not at the top. We fill it to its operational. We're gonna be we know we're gonna fill our Saltstone. So there's no necessity to go any further than that, because it's a lot of work, it takes a long time. But we fill it as high as the grout's gonna go, as high as the water will go.
And how high will the grout go?
41 feet, though, I would like to check for specific action.
And the tank is how tall? 43 feet. So 2 feet from the top.
We're gonna put it, when all these disposals are done, we put it, as a clean cap. We don't fill it all the way to the top. With Saltstone, we have a quote, clean, cement mixture up there. This gives us added defense and depth, or we don't want water getting in. So we have this potential landfill cover, and you have this clean cap over there. So that gives us added protection against any water.
The SDUs 2A and 2B they've got earth around them.
That's correct.
Do you plan to do that to any of the other SDUs?
For the way the SB2, 3, and 5 was designed, it needed that weight of earth to give it part of its strength. This 6 is so strong itself. The walls are 22 inches at the base and 10 inches height. It doesn't need that reinforcement because we have this vertical and horizontal post tension. It's strong within itself, not needing this backfill to address the strength. And it was, in addition to that, there were some shielding concerns at the time when 2 was being designed. That now that we have data, the PCAM softwares, we're just not seeing that. But either way, even we had that deal, these walls are a lot thicker than 2. We wouldn't have to backfill, even if we had the higher radiation.
When you renegotiated your landfill permit to build SDU 6, did the state of South Carolina add any special conditions?
No, they were interested in the detection. They wanted to know if this was going to happen. Obviously, there was, and I apologize for not remembering, there was a set number of disposal units we had to have per leak detection system. And I told them that either way, they wanted a leak detection system. I said I had already intended to put it in. So, and more than one. So that was their primary concern was leak detection. And that's it. We have 4 units.
Back on slide number 5, you have a schematic of the Saltstone production facility operation. And you get the liquid waste feed from tank 50 into the liquid feed system, which then flows into the mixer. So you have virtually all of the liquid waste system, and you mentioned in an earlier slide that 99% of the tank waste is going to end up in this facility.
As low-level waste.
As low level, I understand that. I presume you mean by volume or by?
The radionuclide, one sludge of the 2 waste streams I was talking about earlier, the sludge waste stream and the salt waste stream.
Yeah, I understand, but you meant volume.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have 99% of the liquid waste in the high-level waste system is flowing through that one mixer. Is that correct?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not at Saltstone expert, but yes, it is one.
In other words, you don't have another mixer in parallel with that one. So anything happens to that mixer, the entire system has to stop, at least until you fill your tanks. Tank 50, for example. How big is tank 50?
It's a rough and mean gallon.
Gallons. The SWPF's going to operate, at least when it gets into high gear, at least 8 million gallons per year. So you don't have a whole lot of time to store waste in 50 if something happens to your mixer or anything downstream, your piping to your vaults or anything else. Everything relies on that single path.
I don't disagree with that.
Why would you rely on a single point failure like that and not have parallel mixers capable of taking over if one goes down?
I'll attempt one answer to that, just from my knowledge. I'm a project manager myself, trying to build things. I was managing you probably, I don't see the slide here. These are the salt solution sea tanks. We built 2 surge tanks for salt tank. This really kind of helps with 24/7 operation of SWPF. So we have some surge capacity. If 50 is full, and if we have an upset with the mix. So we have some time to regress. We could still cross that.
What's the
Sure, I
size?
agree, sure.
What's the size of those surge tanks?
This is Mike McLean, the Department of Energy. Earl, if this isn't the right person or the right discussion for a reliability discussion of Saltstone. If the CAB would like that, we could schedule a separate presentation on, you're getting into the reliability issues, redundancy, et cetera. This isn't the right presenter to be able to go into this in any detail.
Well,
We don't have those people here.
Thank you for your opinion, but I beg to differ. We're talking, he presented the slide that shows the process, and so I'm asking questions about that slide. Not only that, but the piping that comes from that mixer goes to the SDU, which is the subject of this presentation. Again, a single pipe.
Mr. Howell, I understand what you're saying. This is not the right presenter to get into a detailed discussion of reliability and the system design. If the CAB subcommittee wants a discussion on that, the Department of Energy will be glad to provide it. But this is not the right person nor the right time to do this.
Okay, let's,
Just real quick, the piece that I own, that piping, I designed that piping, that there's a bit of pipe that's on hold. I made sure that's put on. So there's a failure in the pipe, it's designed to take that pipe out, put it on back in. Nothing terrible, right? That's all it is.
Thank you, Carl.
Dave, I used to run the Saltstone when I was working at site. There's 2 ways you can handle that. One is to install a spare, which is what you're saying. The other way is you have a spare sitting in the warehouse. You've done a reliability study that Mike's talking about.
Now departing.
Brian Bradley.
Days. I don't know whether it's going to do that right now, but I mean, that's the classic way in any continuous operating chemical plant that you address the valid issue that you raised. It's a very important issue, but I mean, there's lots of ways of covering it. And I don't know what the answer is. My guess is the reliability study shows that they haven't installed spare, and they know exactly how long it takes to get the old one out and the new one in. And that fits all the stuff of how they control the inventory of that. But Mike can really get people to know what's going on.
And
I would have provided it if I knew it off the top of my head, but I don't.
All the time, you get all the other numbers.
Earl Shepherd, CAB, if you're done with your presentation, we thank you. To DOE, to David's question, if we could get someone scheduled to just bring us up to speed with that particular answer that he's looking for, that would be lovely. Thank you, sir.
Turn the meeting back over to Earl.
Actually, oh, thank you. Thank you. I actually had 3 small questions. Pilings. How many pilings do we have under the structure, or did it even require pilings?
Piling is an engineered structure when you have some issues with the soil underneath. Very good question. We did a thorough geological study, geotechnical study underneath there. We did find some areas underneath the tank that we call soft zones. So instead of driving piling, which is a valid design thing, we decided to thicken the foundation and put more steel in it to handle any differential settling that might happen during a seismic event. Very good question. We decided that we just thicken it instead of drive piles down.
Okay, and I was, I'm sorry I got here late, but my second question was, I wasn't sure if this was a continuous pour or we had precast wall, or did I hear you say a little bit of
This
both?
was, and I should have went to more, this number 6 was we put forms in place. And unlike the other ones, we just put a form on the ground, let it sit up, and then we pick it up and drop it. We actually went around the well, we put the foundation in, and then we put formwork on each wall and fill it. So that's cast in place is the terminology instead of precast. The other ones were precast, we did cast in place for number 6.
Okay, and the reason why I ask these questions because I have to operate several of these back at home, and we've ran into different issues back and forth. But overall, one of the best options for storage and equalization ever thought of in mankind. So, thank you.
Sure.
I think Jenny wants to turn it over to you now.
Yes.
We're down to draft recommendation by Asian.
Draft recommendation. All right, committee discussion with draft recommendations, prepare a lesson learned report on contract failure for manufacturing ASME vessels for SWPF. Mr. David, you want to
Sure.
go because I know you wanted to
Yeah.
get into that.
Thank you. David Hoyle, CAB. I won't read you this entire record. Everyone has a copy, but we all know that the SWPF is a large and complex treatment facility for decontaminating salt waste solution. The construction of the SWPF was awarded to Parsons back in 2002. They're responsible for designing, building, and startup and operating the SWPF for 1 year. Construction was originally scheduled to be completed in 2009, and now it's projected to be completed, I forget what she said, 2016, yeah, so that's still correct. Now, these delays in completing SWPF, there's been several reasons. In fact, over 115 different contract mods have been made to the contract over these years. And there's been some other big changes, especially in design, that have led to some of these delays. But a significant delay for the project was related to the manufacturing and delivery of 10 large American Society of Mechanical Engineers, or ASME, processing vessels. The original contract to build these vessels was given to a small business contractor that failed because they couldn't provide adequate quality for construction of the vessels. And that contract was terminated. And a second contractor, although not a small business contractor, was incentivized to deliver by July of 2011. However, they did not get delivered until June and July of 2012. Involved in manufacturing of these vessels has seriously delayed construction of SWPF and the progress in closing future non-compliant radioactive waste tanks at Savannah River site, which puts the FFA deadlines in jeopardy, as well as the site treatment plan regulatory deadlines for removing all of the waste from the tanks by 2028. Now, we got a briefing by a representative from DOE-SR, their acquisitions office, last July, and he admitted that despite the significant damage incurred to the schedule for the liquid waste system plan, as well as the FFA that these large ASME vessels delay caused, there was never a systematic root cause analysis nor a lessons learned report produced on the contractual failures associated with the manufacture of these vessels. So, the recommendation, this draft recommendation recommends that DOE conduct a formal root cause analysis and prepare a lessons learned report on the contract problems experienced in manufacturing these vessels and brief the CAB on the results. I welcome any comments.
Jenny Jones Camp, I thank you for writing this, thorough and very good job. Just a little editing thing.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That'll get taken care of.
The bottom,
Right.
over 115 should be deleted, and it will be.
Right.
Otherwise, I think it stands pretty well.
Earl Shepherd, CAB, actually, I have a question for DOE. Do we have anyone here that could speak just small volumes, just to kind of give us any type of input?
Under this recommendation, I think, sure, Mike McElwain is Department of Energy. The department has done root cause analysis, and there have been lessons learned prepared. You can, and it's not the department's practice or intent to influence or tell you what you can or can't recommend. But I understand you were doing this because the individual, David Hefner, who made the presentation on the small business presentations, was not knowledgeable of what had been done on the SWPF project. That was done by the federal project director. There are a number of lessons learned that have been done, but there's the issues dealing with that contract are still in being resolved, and they won't be released to the public. So
The lesson learned reports will not be released to the public?
I didn't understand. Say that again?
Did you just say that the lesson learned reports?
They're not publicly disclosable. They're business sensitive right now. And no, business sensitive information is not, as a general practice, released to the public.
And how long will that be?
I can find that answer out, but it's been a number of years, and it's from what the discussions we had, it's not in the immediate future. But the lessons, I thought the point of what you were doing with your recommendation was that the department ought to go look at what the lessons learned were and understand them. What I'm trying to tell you is we've done this. The department has already done that. It's taken those lessons learned and applied that when it got the second vessel. And it continues to apply it across the DOE site. But asking for sub-recommendation one, that's been done. Sub-recommendation two, and coming and briefing that, we can do that when the disputes and any legal issues associated with them are finished and it's no longer business sensitive, but that's not in the immediate future. I don't have a date as to when that's likely to be done.
Can you tell me if the lessons learned reports that were produced on this issue have been shared with other sites?
That I can't tell you. I don't know that.
I'm going to answer that. As the federal project director, yes, I understand. And then I use
Across our cities, but I'm saying with other DOEs, Hanford, Oak Ridge, that is.
Well, if you got a contractor that failed, like the first one did, are they put on some kind of a list that the federal government has, that you're not going to get that guy in your contract unless he makes a lot of changes, or does he just become another bidder that can repeat this someplace else?
I would have to, well, I think this individual contractor went out of business.
But I would hope the information you share is because somebody is a failure, that he's got to do things before he can get another federal contract.
For direct contracts with DOE, yes, there is a system that does that. We have contract feedback. This was a subcontractor to our contractor. So I don't know the system and how that, whether there's a system for feedback on that. Gene, I don't know. I don't think CPARS goes to that.
Yeah. I think it does, but I'm not positive how, to what level.
I mean, if you don't have an answer,
Yeah.
don't,
Probably.
yeah, could you just try to get us something, soon, please? Thank you.
And if it's available, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
And we'll also find out whether it's been shared with other sites. That's just a simple question, talking to the project about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I guess question to David. Well, who knows where this is going to go based on the discussion, but we have heard a lot over the last few years about the tanks from DOE and perhaps contractor. And this, recommendation says the most significant delay on the SWPF project was related to the manufacturing and delivery of 10 large processing vessels. How certain are you that that is actually the case and that the delay can be mostly attributed to the vessels? I personally am not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Having spoken with an engineer on the project, it was indicated to me that that may well not be the case, and there are other design issues that the problems could be attributed to. So this kind of avoids it. If there was lessons learned on other design stuff and the tanks or all together, I don't know. I don't know if you would want to, if you're going to go forward with this, ask the question about the other design issues if you want to know that in addition to the tanks.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a good point, and frankly, I don't know if it is the most significant, so I might change the to A. It is a significant delay, but it might not be the most, okay? And I'll take into consideration your suggestion about other design problems.
Do we have any other comments? Do we have any other discussions that we need to take care of before we go into the public comment period? Do we have anyone sign up for public comment? David, you have something?
Well, based on the feedback we got from Mike just now, I'm going to make some modifications to this recommendation. But I would like to still forward it to the full cabinet at their next meeting with those modifications.
Sounds good. Well, we'll talk about it and we'll move forward from that point. Earl Shepherd again. Go ahead.
Do one follow-up question, Michael, JJ, CAB. When you do this kind of report, are parts of it ever published? In other words, are parts, the whole thing doesn't be published because it's in litigation or something, but there might be some parts of it that would be public.
I don't think we tried to parse that. Eventually, the material won't be, it's going to be releasable, it won't be business sensitive. It's only going to be business sensitive where you're dealing with potential litigation issues and things like that. Whether we could release parts of it or not, I don't know whether there's a part. I don't know whether that.
All right. I'd just like to apologize for being late. My route was not the same, so I didn't know that. And then 10 miles from here, they're doing road work. So I was like, out of all the 100 times I've been here, I've never seen road work being done. So I apologize, and I thank you, the Waste Management Committee, for moving on in my absence. It seems as if everything ran smooth, and thanks for the support staff and Ms. Lisa. So I thank you all, and if we don't have, okay, go ahead, Dave.
Jenny and I talked about this a little bit at the last full board meeting. A member of the public suggested that the CAB might want to look into how DOE evaluates its contractors for determining award fee. Now, for those of you that don't know what award fee is, it's basically a bonus that's given to the contractors for how well they've done their job over the past year. And I thought that was a useful suggestion. I don't know if the CAB has ever looked into DOE's evaluation of contractors in terms of the quality of their performance in determining award fee. But I think it'd be a useful thing for the Waste Management Committee to look at in terms of how they provide award fee for liquid and solid waste contractors. and whether we should make any advice in that regard. I'd welcome other members' opinions about that.
Earl Shepherd CAB, my opinion on that is pretty blunt. If you're hired to do your work, then I feel like you should do your work and get paid justly. I'm not a fan of.
Earl, could you speak up? We have no mic and we really can't hear.
No, I was saying that this is my personal opinion. If someone's hired to do work, then your work is just your work and you get paid for the work that you do. I'm not a particular guy that's fond of stipends and bonuses and things of that sort, so we can discuss this further, because I don't know that everyone would agree with my opinion or assessment of that particular deal, but I really don't know the process. I've not dug into that particular process of how monies are dispersed and what bonuses you get for meeting particular milestones.
John McMichael, CAB. In dealing in my past career, you know, if the bid structure is based on a base, and then you get performance bonuses for completion dates or things like that, that's one thing. But if you just get I'm not sure how this is set up or structured, if you just get, what I'm trying to say is I agree with what you said. Unless it is built in and it's part of the understanding of the bid process. That makes sense.
Yeah, award fee is certainly part of the contract process.
Okay. So they have it, is it based on, I mean, is it a standard operating procedure?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jenny Jones, CAB. Dave and I have gone back and forth with this a little bit, discussing it. It's a critical issue, I think. I had written an email to Pat McGuire, and apparently, Pat is involved with it. To read his email, there's a website, there's a public website, sro.srs.gov/contractorperformance.html.
What was that?
On the website, contractorperformance.html, and I clicked on that, and it does have an analysis of the bonuses, percentages, denials, and some information on that. And I'm going to speak individually for myself here. I find it upsetting, as I'm sure many in the public do, the amount of money and so on and so forth. So as an individual, I also contacted Karen Patterson, who's chairperson of the State of South Carolina Governor's Nuclear Commission, and I think it's changed its name. But
Governor's Nuclear Advisory Board.
I did express my personal concern as to the money that was being spent and the amount of bonuses that were being spent. And just in general knowledge, I'm finding that, you know, when we have an issue about money and awards and stuff from a federal point of view, I'm thinking we should also contact legislatures, local politicians, whoever you can think of, that has some responsibility in DC for this area. And then we've gone back and forth somewhat as to switching back to being a CAB member. What, if anything, we as CAB members should do about this? That's kind of where I am now. I personally think it's something that's better handled in DC. Pat McGuire says, as far as CAB, I'm going to read a quote now from his email. Accordingly, as Pat McGuire, it is my opinion as the code deputy designated federal official that it would be outside the CAB's purview to develop a recommendation or position associated with fee earned by the contractor. It doesn't hurt me at all to write a recommendation and have the same response we get from DOE, which says we cannot answer this because it's outside our purview. that's within our rights also. That's something we can do. But I did want to read that into the information of the committee session.
Yeah, you shared that email with me, and
I should.
I'm kind of dumbfounded by that opinion, because there's nothing in our mission or our charter that walls us off from commenting on how the contractors are paid. Nothing. Our scope is EM programs. These contractors are performing EM program work, and they're remunerated for it. And I think we have all the scope in the world to comment on how DOE rewards its contractors for performing EM missions. That's my opinion.
Well, again, I'll state my opinion, and this is just me. If you're paid to do your work, then that's your pay. Why get paid again because you've done your work? But,
Now, do I understand what you're saying by that is that you don't think they should get any bonus?
That's just me. That's my thought. And I'm not pressing that on anybody. That's just my thought. If you're going to do some work for me, trust me, I am not going to give you a bonus for doing the work that I'm already paying you to do. Now, that's just me. So
I would hate to be your waiter. You know,
well,
you probably don't tip with a damn.
No, I tip very well.
We have stimulated some conversation.
And I'm sorry if I'm hurting anybody's feelings, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's just saying, from the point of view, realize I'm a contractor at a level where I don't get any bonuses. I have a problem hearing the award fee being talked about as a bonus, because the way the contracts are scheduled is that you get a certain amount for doing the other part, and then what you call the award fee is how well you do the jobs that are through there, and there's specific deliverables, and that's what you're calling a bonus to me is getting paid for the work that they contract to do. And I mean, it's a terminology sort of thing. There have been such things as cost plus fixed fee contracts or cost plus performance contracts going down. This is something where there's a base sort of thing, and then additional work above the absolute positive minimum possible is compensated at the level of this award fee. It's not really a bonus, it's payment for work performed, in my way of looking at it.
I guess what you're saying is anything that is added to this contract and not really a chop list at the end of the work, because
Earl, let me, Mike McAlance, DOE, let me suggest this. And I think the vernacular is important. Bonuses are usually something we talk about in terms of individuals, presidents, managers, people, workers, whatever getting. Fee is something that the contractor earns, and it's usually part of the contracting basis. There's a number of different types of contracts, which I'm learning about as I become the assistant manager, but I've got an awful lot to learn. If you're considering doing more with this, you can work with the CAB support team to put on your work list a discussion of the contracting types and award fee and basically what that stuff means. I think you don't have to make a recommendation to come and present what all that stuff is. We can give you the information so that at least you're all talking about the same kinds of things, that we're not mixing bonuses with fees, and the different contractors have different contracting vehicles which have different incentive programs with it. Some of them are there's a large number in the federal process, number of ways you can do contracting and pay profit to the contractors, an appropriate level of profit commensurate with performance. And really you need a separate breakout session to get into some detail on that. We can provide that if you want.
No, that's fine. We'll get with you. Thank you.
Get with them. I don't want to bypass.
No, I got you. No problem. No, it was just a.
Yeah, I guess what we ought to do then is, if we want to pursue.
Can I make one comment?
Of course.
I'm looking at some of them now that I just happen to have on this computer and travel. Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. I wasn't quite sure what Pat said, but I'm just looking at the letter from Savannah Riverside to Dwayne Wilson, who was Savannah River Nuclear Solutions. Subject: final fee determination for fiscal year, this is 2011. Base work performance period. And this is signed by Dave Moody. It's from the site. And that's my impression of where the evaluations are done. They may be checked off on headquarters, and this is copied to a whole bunch of Savannah River Nuclear Solutions people. So my understanding, they can explain it, it's a site evaluation. And Dave Moody, the site manager, is an EM official. You guys review EM, so it seems to me like it's
George, out of public. I think I'm gonna say the same thing that Mike does say, but let me try. When you ask for whatever you wanna ask for, don't ask DOE to tell you how they decided how much SRNS is getting and how much SRS is getting. Just ask them for what's the form that they set up with, what's the procedures that they use. It's basically that the government owns everything on the site. The contractors don't bring any of their capital into the site. When the contract is issued, they end up saying, all these are cost allowable. And basically, the government's going to pay for all these things. At the point, they also have a list of things that the contractors have to do as part of their contract. When they do more of these things, they get more money. If they don't do them all, they get less money. And you don't have to get into any judgments of, well, you gave SR and that's too much money. You need to give SRR enough money. That stuff you got no business knowing about. But I think the CAB has a right, and the public has a right to know what's the form, how these contracts are arranged. If you ask for something like that, I think they probably would get it. You don't need a recommendation. When I was on the CAB, these kind of things, we just talked to the folks, and they got the right people to come in, and they gave the CAB a, 20, 30-minute presentation, and this is how the contracts at the site are set up. And you don't want to get into any of the deciding how much money anybody should get, or whether they accomplished this or didn't accomplish that, because 10 people have 10 different opinions on that. And that DOE has a list of people. These are the people that make the decisions. They get all of it, they come in. But I think you can get that information in a generic way. Don't ask for specifics. And don't get into arguing about getting too much.
Thank you, Joe.
That's DOE.
So Tina, is there
I
something?
put it on, as a topic for the work plan for 2016. We will, bring it up then and.
Perfect.
Get under the.
Perfect. Thank you. And that way, everybody's perception is not skewed in any form or fashion. Thank you.
Can you entertain a comment from the public on that?
Sure.
All of the QA failures that I'm familiar with, and they're considerable over the 6 years I was on the CAB, involve not so much the failure of the contractors to perform the work that was contracted for or as it was contracted for. It involved the subcontractors and the subcontractors of the subcontractors and the subcontractors of the subcontractors. So if you ask for that information, my suggestion is that you don't indicate you're only looking at the umbrella answer of how the contractor's work is evaluated. You need to do a fall through question.
Thank you. Anything else around the table?
Thanks, Earl.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks to everyone again. I appreciate you guys taking care of business while I was traveling. And if we have no other comments, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and get the show on the road, please.
Calling us to order.
Order. What's that? I'm Larry Powell. I'm chairman of the Nuclear Materials Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone here. On my board, I'll have to read it or else I'll mess it up. On my board are Jenny Jones, Vice Chair, Andrew Bush, Louis Chavez, Don Gillis, David Hall, Daniel Kaminsky, and Chris Tremors. Do we have anybody online? Nope. That's easy. Okay. We'd like anybody to participate in the discussion, members of the board as well as members of the public. And anybody that's on the board, we'd like for anybody to sit at the table. Want to let everybody know that we are recording this live. So speak loudly and clearly and introduce yourself so that the machine picks you up. I'd like to welcome everyone here. On my board.
Please mute your computer if you're going to listen to.
That was you were hearing.
That was me? Oh, okay. We'll try to keep on the agenda topics during the meeting. There will be a public comment period where others can be heard. Anyone wishing to answer questions or address the CAB must come to the podium to speak. We don't really have a podium, but you just kind of step forward in the middle. This will ensure the online attendees can hear the comments and questions. There's no public comment sign-up sheet. There is a sign-up sheet in the back that all the CAB members, if you were at the last meeting and this meeting, you need to sign the sign-up sheet twice. So don't think just because you signed up for the last meeting, you signed up for this one. I would also like to remind everybody what our committee purpose is. The committee was established to study issues that involve nuclear materials, uranium and plutonium, that have an impact on present or future SRS activities, including used nuclear fuel program activities, nuclear materials management, and nuclear material integration. So that's what we are here to do. In DOE's response to Recommendation 322, at each meeting, the respective DOE point of contact will provide a brief status update of ongoing SRS activities relevant to this committee's purpose. Maxine Maxted is our point of contact from the DOE, and I'd like for Maxine to go ahead and give us our update.
As Maxine is coming up, I want to thank Maxine and Alan Gunter for their tour of SRS and
Yes.
printed materials. And let's give them a round of applause. And
That was our first bullet. We wanted to thank the CAB members who were able to attend the tour of the nuclear materials facilities on the 30th, and we hope you found it to be beneficial in your work on the CAB.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
As indicated in our previous updates to the committee and full board, SRNS as well as DOE have been conducting readiness reviews for various facilities and operational activities this fiscal year. These reviews are at many different levels depending on the scope of the type of work. The reviews included facility reviews to declare readiness, SRNS review using independent personnel not associated with the facility, and DOE reviews. Both normal oversight activities by the specific facility representatives, engineers, and program personnel responsible for the facility, as well as special readiness assessment team reviews by independent DOE personnel. All readiness assessments are stopped during the SRS operational pause. SRS will give you a separate update on the operational pause, but I want to cover a couple of items. Only 2 facilities, H Canyon and HB line, remain in operational pause at this time. Essential work activities are continuing where required to maintain safe and secure site operations. For example, completion of rounds, technical safety requirements, surveillances, those type of things to maintain our safety, those are continuing. These essential work activities ensure that a facility is maintained in a safe condition, even during the operational pause. DOE-SR has implemented in parallel an oversight plan that includes assessments by qualified personnel of essential work activities, non-essential work, increased DOE senior management field presence, increased DOE back shift coverage, and deliberate operations of work for proper procedure use and work performance. DOE headquarters has provided assistance with oversight activities with experts in conduct of operations and fire protection engineering. In order for the facilities to move into the delivery operations, the management team for the facility must demonstrate that the facility's people and paper have been evaluated and where required adjustments made to ensure the work performance expectations are understood. During this period, DOE staff having oversight responsibilities for the specific facility must evaluate what SRS has done, document the results of their reviews, and provide an evaluation to DOE senior management of their observed understanding of the facility's people and paper and if it's meeting DOE's expectations. So, L area and 235F, along with FAA operations, have completed all actions required to exit the pause and are currently in delivered operations. Delivered operations requires extra reviews of work activities to assess the risk and hazard of the work. Based on that ranking of the risk hazard, additional oversight may be required beyond the required senior supervisory watch while the work activities are conducted. All the requirements for K area to enter into delivered operations have been met and approved. K area will move to delivered operations on Monday, October 19th. DOE-SR manager has requested assistance from headquarters with a conduct of operations team assessment, which is scheduled for the week of October 19th. This will utilize the DOE-SR facility representatives and subject matter experts for evaluation of facilities already in delivered operations by that time. So we'll have 3 at least of our facilities that'll be going through that headquarters assessment. Okay, thank you. And before I sit down, we'd like to introduce Wyatt Clark. He's the Vice President for EM Operations under SRS.
Thank you. Nice summary. Maxine did a good job of taking you to where we are today. I thought I'd take a few minutes to just talk a little bit about the history. I think we're all pretty current with where we're at, but it's worthy of a little emphasis. You know, on September 3rd, we had a pretty significant procedure violation. In that case, we had a team that was working intentionally violate a procedure. They chose to not use a cart that would give us critical spacing in terms of transporting samples. That concerned us a lot. You know, we put a lot of value in safety, and the concern at that point was how confident were we that that wasn't a bigger issue. So our COO and Chief Operating CEO and COO both decided to take the plant to a pause. Now, when we identified the issue ourselves, the next working day, we already stopped movement of material in that facility. But this was across the entire company. And the real purpose was to ensure that, with confidence, we didn't have that issue someplace else. As part of that pause, we spent face-to-face all-hands meetings and kicked off small group meetings to emphasize expectations. I'll tell you that the VPs led those large group sessions, very interactive, a lot of discussion about what went on and expectations. So it was clear communication on what was expected. In the small group sessions, we went to the next level of not just verifying the message got sent, but that it got received. And we actually went through, you know, numerous procedures, et cetera. I'll tell you that those procedure reviews the feedback we got from the large group sessions have been very positive. And I'm here to tell you with a level of confidence, what we saw in Beeline, we don't see elsewhere within the company. But it was worth the investment to do that level of review. So that pause was a very positive action in order to ensure we got the right messaging as it relates to procedure compliance. That's very important in what we do. I think you all would agree to that. Maxine kind of took you through where we are with delivered operations. We put together assessment plans, and part of that assessment plan looked at the facilities in terms of paper and people. And then we laid together a strategy that as we moved into delivered operations, we put additional oversight going forward. In fact, we have additional small group meetings planned to continue the reinforcement of lessons learned. We've taken this very seriously. I think if you put in context everything that I've just described, you recognize our approach is one that was really trying to target the behavior we saw and to ensure that didn't exist elsewhere. As we move into delivered operations, we're being very methodical, very deliberate in what we release, and we have a set of criteria that we've used to release that and to put oversight. So even in delivered ops, things are a bit slower than what you would normally see from an operation viewpoint, but appropriate, right? I'm not really capable of telling you when will we move out of delivered ops, because at this point we're in the continued review. I will tell you there are some functions within SRNS that are close to moving out of delivered ops, but those are the non-nuclear functions of procurement, of legal, those type functions. We thought that this level of attention was appropriate given what we were dealing with. And I think if you kind of stand back, you'd agree with us that we took a robust approach to addressing the issue. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just as a point of curiosity, Larry Powell, CAB. The vitrification process, is that something that can be stopped and started back relatively easy? I always felt like that once it was stopped, it was a real hassle to get it going again.
So it's a good question. The nuclear material, SRNS's side, doesn't hold DWPF. So DWPF is in, the SRR contract. That's not involved in the pause. The pause is SRNS specific. Okay.
I applaud the deliberate approach you guys are going through in evaluating how this incident occurred. I'm not quite clear on the status of your evaluation of that incident and your conclusions, or, have you come to conclusions on that?
Yes, we're still in the root cause analysis. And you'd expect us to walk through that process pretty specifically, looking at all contributing and causes, right? And we're probably still weeks away from finishing that setup. In fact, the output from that root cause analysis will be used as a set of prerequisites before Beeline is ever released to move into a delivered ops mode, right? So we've used that as a gate to ensure that we don't move too quickly as it relates to Beeline. I can tell you that the investigation to date has highlighted that the individuals involved intentionally chose to deviate from the procedure. And you can get into the why space, and you can point to maybe some groupthink. Candidly, they're very bright individuals, and in this case, I think there was a tendency to think they were smarter than the procedure document. But as you and I both know, once I leave the procedures, I'm now in knowledge space, and knowledge space has a 50% error rate. So I've got to stay in that procedure to ensure I'm okay. We'll finish that root cause analysis to make sure that we're good to go with the controls and then implement it. But the direct cause is a violation of that procedure.
Is there any indication in your root cause analysis that fatigue was a factor?
So that's a good question. And I would say, fatigue in terms of the work, could have contributed to that exercise. Remember, we had multiple people, so there's 3 operators and a first line engaged in that. So there's differing levels of fatigue from that vantage point. All of them contribute to that decision. The follow-on question would be, well, what about schedule pressure, Wyatt? And I'll tell you that everybody internalizes schedule pressure a little differently, right? One of the things we've been trying to emphasize as we go along is, you and I both take actions based on our belief system. I click a safety belt every day because I believe it's going to take care of me. And that's really built on some level of experiences. So one thing we were concerned with is if there is a belief system that this is okay, we ferret that out and change it. And that's the reason we've invested this level of time in the past.
Yeah. While I applaud this very deliberate approach that you've taken, I am concerned how long it's taking. So it's almost a month now that we've been going through this with no end in sight. And I worry about the slowdown of work in the meantime. And being careful is something we want you to be. But I question how long it's taking.
Yeah, I share your concerns from the vantage point of even morale. A team that's working, typically it's easier to maintain morale. But I will tell you, when you're dealing with something like this, I don't know another approach than to be very succinct and deliberate. Maxine described the fact that with the exception of H Canyon and HB line, we really moved the facilities into deliberate ops. They're now working. H Canyon, I will project into next week, the beginning of the following, it will be into deliberate ops. The root cause analysis is the long pole for B-line, and I have to get that done. Back to the schedule pressure. We're really balancing these. I want my team to do this the right way, and I'm not pressing them from a schedule perspective. There are activities that we've had to delay, so your point is well made. And let's face it, we're here for a mission. We're here to provide activity. We want to get to that, but we're going to do it and do it safely.
I had several questions, and fatigue was one of them. I'm going to take you back, and Dr. Hayes, you might support me on this. One of my serious concerns is this is part of a pattern. This is just not a unique situation. We received a letter from National Safety Board, wasn't it last year in January of 2014, of their concern of a pattern of problems. So I say to you, thank you for taking the deliberate and extreme level that you are doing to do this so that we can stop this pattern of behavior that we're seeing. In my opinion, I'm not a scientist, but this is the worst one because some of them have been equipment, this and that, but this not only is dealing with people, which are extremely difficult to deal with, but it's dealing with one of our more radioactive installations. Am I not correct? Like I said, I'm not a scientist. So I support your slowness. I support your getting down to small groups with these people, eyeballing them, whatever you have to do to stop this. I'll call it a trend, but it was publicized by the National Safety Board. We have a letter. So I think everything you do, I guess I'm going to say that if we need to go slow, then we need to go slow. My next set of issues is concentrating on the fatigue. And I'll say it on the record tonight. One of the things I've been researching and we'll discuss later in committee is the issue of fatigue. Now, historically, I know you know that the reason SRS was placed here is so it would be remote. Back on the issue of fatigue. So therefore, our workers are driving, in some cases, 1 hour one way. So we have an extension of 2 hours to whatever hours they're working. And I want to hear from DOE and some of the contractors as to what kind of shift limitations what kind of parameters are we putting around our workers. I know I'm talking a lot, and I'll come to a question in a minute. I also have concern about the age of our workers. And again, I'll come to the question in a minute. I'm concerned about the age of the workers because, according to the data, our senior people, our older workers, are retiring. They have a level of expertise based on the number of years they've worked that is hard to replicate in some of the younger workers coming out. I'm not criticizing the younger workers. I'm sure they're fine. I'm just pointing out that we have an age of recruitment issue. My question is, here it comes. When you're doing your, what do you call lesson learned? Two-part question. Are age and fatigue some of the factors you're looking at? Are shift work some of the factors you're looking at?
Yeah, so, you know, there's a number of...
And I'm not asking for answers. I'm just saying, is that some of the factors?
So all of those factor in. In fact, when you start a pre-job at the beginning of a shift, beginning of an evolution, that's part of the discussion that you have in terms of, are you fit? Are you having difficulties? There's a long list of precursors that you'd walk through. I'd emphasize a couple of things here. If you go back and look, fatigue didn't show up as a contributing cause. I've always, in the back of my mind, used that as a realistic aspect of we're human, right? As we get tired, we start moving in that direction. I emphasize the fact there are 4 people there at varying levels, certainly the supervisor being removed. So I think what you really get into is more a situation of groupthink. This is an opinion at this point, groupthink than a fatigue aspect. Your comment about the young workers, I actually, I suggest that there's another observation I've had, which really goes positively towards the young workers, because as we bring in, and it's not just young, it's new to us. Sometimes they come new to us, but they have some age, maybe not as much as me, but they have some age on them. And what I've gained out of that is the advantage of having green eyes. So when they come in, they really do present a different perspective. So I believe the diversity that we're seeing is a good thing. And in fact, I embrace that because it gives me different perspectives. In this case, that team did not they didn't demonstrate the desire to stop and take a timeout. You know, the pause we're taking right now is a grand timeout. We said, let's work through this. In this case, there wasn't a timeout, and there was a decision as a group to go forward and violate the procedure. Now with a lot of integrity, they gave us that answer. You know, they've told us that. So I think very highly of the individuals to tell us forthright what they did and went forward with it. The reality is we can't accept that, and that's the issue that we're dealing with.
There were a couple other factors. David brought up the point of, all I could think of is the French word, ennui, boredom. Is that on the list of factors you look at? That's not the word. It's not the word. It's complacency. You know, psychological factors like that, unmeasurable factors. Is that on your list?
Yeah, in fact, there are human performance tools that we've embraced that address that, right? So if I have an HPI tool for you to address yourself in terms of complacency, it might be second checking, peer checking, and And this procedure was built around checking, because you're dealing with the type of material. But it's not sufficient if both of us decide we're going to deviate.
My last question, I know you're glad to hear this. Back on the first committee question, how much of this lesson learned are you gonna be able to share with us? I mean, can you, A, give us the tools of analysis of what you looked at? B, can you give us any answers? We've heard from some of the DOE that, well, we can't do that till all lawsuits are, what, if anything, can you share with us?
Can I take that as an action? Because I'm not sure I know how much I can and cannot, but clearly, if we have lessons that benefit, we want to be able to get those out, and we're sharing them within the plan.
And our plan for December, because that's kind of an open time period for your presentations, was to come and give you an update on everything that's going on with the pods and what we've got in the root cause known at that time.
Okay, so because you weren't here the last committee meeting, we were told that, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that they couldn't share things like that because.
Well, that was different. That was different.
The root cause and things like that, whatever we can share at that time, we'll bring forward to the committee in December.
Okay, and I guess I'm asking if there's things that you cannot share, if you would.
There probably will be some personal things that we are not allowed to share because of HR rules and regulations, so there'll be some things like that that aren't shareable, but if it's involving the program and procedures and things like that, I'm sure we'll be able to share that information.
I have one more question.
Wait a minute.
Remember one here. When you do your practices, I know you do drills and practices, do you practice pauses? Okay, when I'm dealing with students, we actually have to get out and practice certain things. And I understand that you can't really practice some of this stuff, I know, but a pause you could practice.
So when you say a pause, are you talking a timeout? A timeout? Yeah.
Because you're saying
That's a great question. In fact, I indicated that as a result of this, the procedure wasn't used, so the samples are not in a cart at this time. We have gone through and built a special procedure. We've gotten the authorization to be able to move forward, and we've gone through 2 practices to move that material into the appropriate containers. Both of those had practice pauses, even to the point of and multiple team play. So it's RadCon, Ops, engineering, they're all in there doing the team play, and that's not abnormal. In fact, for most first-time use activities, you go through some level of simulation to get a validation of a procedure, right? And it's important to do that. So in this area, we actually have a simulator, a glove box simulator that we use.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next report because one of the things that you told us the last time is that they actually reviewed the procedure before they did the procedure, and it's like, how in the world could this not work?
So they reviewed the procedure in a tabletop the day before, and then so this is true. They reviewed it in a tabletop the day before, and then you do a pre-job the day of, but reviewing the procedure the day before doesn't mean that day of I'm not, in this case, not going to deviate from the procedure. So there was a decision to not use the carts in that situation.
And again, I compliment you on your, and I look forward to your continuing candidness and openness.
I share your opinion about diversity of tenure, for lack of a better word, amongst the workforce is a healthy thing because newer workers come in with fresh eyes and see things that maybe older workers have grown too accustomed to. I'm wondering whether you had a diversity amongst the team that performed this thing, and I'm concerned, frankly, with newer workers when they do point out issues that maybe ought to be done a different way, they are largely ignored and tamped down by the more mature workers because this is the way we all have done it, Sonny, shut up. And I think that's very prevalent in our workforce. And I'm not sure how you fix that.
Yeah. Peer pressure is something that exists in all elements of society, right? I will tell you, David, that during the large groups, that specific item got discussed. In fact, I even, I had the benefit of having mixed groups and intended to do that. And we had some very young rad techs in there, and we got some interchange. I find it a whole lot better than me just standing up and telling you something to have some interchange. So it's kind of my style in that. And I'll tell you that that's something that as a management team, we have to pay attention to, right? We were young at one point and we knew what that was like going through, right? But what we reinforced was, hey, if you don't feel good about this, you don't feel like you can work it like the document, you see the changing conditions, that's where you take a time out and you have a free one. Now you don't feel like you get to count those, right? You just stop, ask the question, and then engage supervision, right? You asked two questions, one related to tenure, peer pressure, the other one related to the mix of this team. They were all very senior. And had we had a little more diversity there, I think we might have got a different response. Had there been some communications different, there may have been. But as it is, no, it was a very senior team.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Dan Kaminsky, CAB. Is SRS ISO certified?
So I'll have to defer. I know there's portions of us that are ISO. I mean, there are certain, our lab certainly has an ISO certification. We have
International standards of conformity.
I will tell you that we routinely recertify in ISM. We are a STAR site. Part of that is field work involvement in the task and feeling like they own safety at that level. And it goes through a very very elaborate review. I can't compare it to an ISO standard unless I had them side by side.
Sure. So do you have internal or external auditors auditing your processes? What frequency?
So we have a number of audits that we run through. Of course, external, the department is, and in this case, this facility actually had a facility rep that was part of the review. And this team had actually been assessed by both us as part of a readiness assessment about a year ago. And then the FR performed an assessment as well. We have a function called the IEB, and it is a independent evaluation board, similar to the FEB during your tenure.
I'm sorry, is that IEB, is that internal or external to SRNS?
So it would be internal to SRS, but set aside from the line organization of operations, right? And we routinely bring in fact, the IEB is engaging the facilities at this point with a number of eyes from Newport News Shipyard. So we make it a habit to bring in resources so you can get some independent eyes. So that process is very rigorous. They spend several weeks in the facility observing evolutions, planning, activities, communication, the whole umbrella of conduct of operations.
Okay. The reason I ask is I'm from the procurement environment for manufacture, so we don't do anything nuclear. But I'm regularly assessed and scrutinized on our processes, procedures to fill those gaps. And to hear that their last assessment was perhaps as far as a year ago.
So let me back up. I want to make sure I give clarity.
Okay.
They went through a readiness assessment a year ago, which was a full up, how do you go through your exercise, et cetera. There are other assessments that occur.
Okay, so it's more than just.
But that readiness assessment is to think about it as getting the keys. You're going to go take your driver's test to be able to drive. That's what that is focused on. Maxine started with the comment that we have brought a number of facility modules up through the course of this past year. Each one of those requires a very detailed readiness assessment where the line organization evaluates their readiness, what needs to change, are they ready? We bring in a company entity that then looks at it, so it's outside the line organization, but does an independent. And then based on that, I notify the department that I'm ready, and then they bring in an independent entity to look at it. So that is a very rigorous process that takes weeks to a month and a half to be able to go through.
Okay, and the findings of like the last audit or the last readiness assessment, were there, ISO kind of divides it into major and minor type infractions. Was any such report generated in HB or H Canyon?
Every readiness assessment generates a report. And we define it as A items, B items. A items are, you have to do this before you get the keys. B is a follow-on activity lesson. So, and every one of those gets it, every one of those gets evaluated. If you have an A item, you don't go forward until it's complete.
Okay, and were there any on the last assessment?
So the last assessment for B-line was actually over the summer, and it was related to the mods we put in place for the event back in January. And that review was one that was just a contractor only, and the response was no, there were no A's at that point.
Were there, were there any other issues found in any of the other areas as you reviewed those processes? I think you had mentioned that there weren't any outside of H or HB.
So one of the things we wanted to make sure we drilled down on was drift. You know, the concept that over time, any organization can slightly drift from the standard. The example that I've used is my father was a highway patrolman. He taught me to drive. You better believe I truly understood how to drive as he went through it, right? But the first stop sign I came to, his question was, so what is that? And my answer was, it's a stop sign. Well, what's it mean? It means to stop. I'm really starting to question whether he thought I was cerebrally capable of doing it, right? And then, so what does it mean? Your tires stop rolling, Dad, in his answer. Remember that, because you're gonna have a tendency to drift over time. People do that every day, and that's how they have accidents at stop signs. That's a drift. One of our exercises as we went through this was to look for drift in other areas, and we saw examples of drift. I think, go back to your comment about ISO. I think if you go and you really assess, you'll find drift and you'll go fix that, get your standard back up. Right? So the pause is beneficial in that it validates the assumptions, but it also gives us the opportunity to ferret out and fix those lines.
And then I'll finish my comments with two comments. Number one, thank you for the pause. I thought it was the right action from everything I've learned over the years regarding safety. And secondly, kind of backing up what David was speaking of, with the diversification of tenure, you can easily pollute and steer younger minds the wrong way. And that's where I think some of the concerns of others come into play, that this is dragging on a little too long. And some of those young people, they need to see the consequences of the drift. Not that I'm a headhunter or anything like that, but it needs to be a little quicker and closer to the action, if at all humanly possible, so that they can clearly see that that is not the path they want to take if they want to keep this as a career.
Understood. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, Maxine has a presentation for us on SRS Elevation Spent Nuclear Fuel Program update.
One more thing, just to tell you from an L area perspective on operational costs, because we were responsible for overseeing all of those big group sessions and the small sessions and things like that. It was important to the facility managers that they understood that their people got it. And in L area, one of the things that she brought home, because the L area is isolated, as you saw if you were on the tour, they considered themselves a family. And she said, you guys are not going to like this, but you are not a family. And, so everybody's going, why would you say this? And her point was, if you're family, you let your family members slide. She says, we're a team. You don't let your team members slide. And that hit home. I think everybody out there understood what was going on in performance drift, and it really hit home, and they've taken this to heart, and they are doing a detailed look. I mean, you think it's a pause, but they're going through procedures after procedures. They're going through any kind of work documents. So there is a lot of work that's going on, and a lot of information and things are being taken into heart so that they understand what they need to do. So back to the LRS. Basically, this was one of your work plan topics. We want to give you an update on the receipts that we've had and what we've shipped to the Kansas, which is a good news story. Yeah, we're shipping stuff out. Again, that's just a picture of L area on the outside. And remember standing underneath the hi-hat? And this is inside where you can see the actual basins and the racks. This is a list of acronyms if you need them. I'll try not to use them. This thing works. Again, this is your CAB diagram. This is L area right here. Okay. Overview of the basin. Basically, it was originally it was a reactor. It was built in the 50s. It was converted to be our storage facility for fuel back in the 90s. So all of the fuel was moved into L Basin during that time period, and that's where we receive all of the fuel that we receive from domestic and foreign research reactors. It's 3.4 million gallons of water. We're very proud of that water. We keep it very clean and very clear. The top of those racks are actually 17 feet below water. And so you can see it back here when you're there. This shows you a bundle of fuel going into the rack. We bundle all of our fuel. A bundle can hold anywhere from 3 to 5 assemblies, depending on what type of fuel it is and the size of that fuel. Let's see, our pool depth goes from 17 to 50 feet. We have one transfer bay. That is our hold point, our choking point in the facility, because everything has to come in and out of that same place. We have had a report done that requires continuous surveillance and maintenance, and if we continue that work and evaluating the fuel as well, we can make the basin last at least another 50 years. Okay. So we talked about our bundle fuel. We saw a picture that on the slide. This is typical. This is the majority of what we do is bundle. We're at about 85% full. I think last year we were about 90, but we've moved stuff out, so it's a good news story. We're approximately at 960 bundles. That changes, not on a daily basis, but on a monthly basis. That's changing every month now. And because of the AROD, which is the amended record of decision, that allows us to process up to 1,000 of those bundles and up to 200 hypercores. Which hypercores are here. You can see there are 2 cylinders inside each other. We actually store those separately, just for criticality control, although we're assured that they won't reach criticality and it's just being stored and shipped that way. But we actually keep them apart and store them separately. So we are currently 100% full. We have 120 core slots, and we are full, completely full. Heifer has 96 core spots up in Oak Ridge. The Heifer is a high flux isotope reactor in Oak Ridge. So it does a lot of science and even some commercial experiments that they do. And the isolation cans, this is one of the issues that our defense board members have. We have fuel that is breached, which means the fuel and the cladding is weakened or cut or corroded so that water can get into the fuel meat, and that causes a lot of contamination issues. We have those isolated away from the rest of the water. You can't really see what's going on inside those cans because they are sealed. So we've worked on some things to try and look through that for addressing the defense board's concerns. They're basically afraid that fuel is going to become a sludge in the bottom of the can. Right now, all of our indications, because we have had UT testing, is that's not the case. The fuel is still maintaining its shape and that it's in good form. So our accomplishments in 15. We completed the shielded transfer system modifications. This was a big one for us. So this is the shielded transfer system here. We had to modify the internals of that, and this is new, and this is new, the hoists are new, to be able to accept the Canadian NRU NRX fuel. It's 10 foot tall, and it's a lot heavier than our normal fuel. The normal material test reactors fuel was probably about 3 to 4 foot. So we had to change the internals of this system in order to be able to address that basket. This fits the LWT, which is the legal weight truck cast. Because of its height, we don't have enough room in our transfer bay to continue to have water shielding to protect our workers. So we have what's called a dry well, which is just a hole that the cast fits down in. This is a shielded tube, and it has mechanisms inside like a bracket and cameras. This moves over to this dry well here, that's just got a lid on it right now. So it moves over, and then they can pull the basket out of the cast up into this, slide it back over to the water hole, and then they can lower the basket into the water, and then we can move it into the basin. So that's because of our basin depth isn't long enough, that's what we had to put in place. And you'll hear in the commercial industry, they'll talk about a dry transfer system. This is basically a dry transfer system. It's just permanently installed. We have received 4 FRR casts this year and 3 DRR casts. We made 11 shipments of the 70-ton cast over to H Canyon. And I think that's probably going to be updated to 12 for September because these were based on August numbers. So we did 12 for a total of 120 bundles that were moved out of the basin this year. And we continue to store our spent fuel and our heavy water safely. This is a 70-ton cast. This is what actually we put the bundled fuel in to go to the H Canyon. So the fuel goes inside this. It's on a rail car. The rails will take it over to the H Canyon for us, pull it into their railroad tunnel, and then their crane will remove the fuel and put it into the developers. And the top speed of that is no more than 12 miles an hour. So our current approach, we're going to continue to safely store all of our fuel wet. We do have few drums that are dry stored. They're in like 55-gallon, they're old 6M drums, 55-gallon size fuel. That's a rarity for us, but that's the only dry storage that we have. We talked about the amended record of decision, allowing the 1,000 bundles. This is the slide that needs to be updated. We've actually shipped 120 bundles through September. And the amount that we can ship each year and process depends on how much money we get in our H Canyon is continuing to process the aluminum plastic fuel. It could continue to process it past the AROD amount, but that decision has not been made by the department. An additional NEPA would probably just require at least another supplemental analysis in order to do that. Right now, H Canyon cannot process any stainless or zirconium-cladded fuel. We do have some in the basin. This is old fuel. Because of this, the canyon can't dissolve the stainless and zirc. So it would relieve pieces into the dissolver, and we can't do that under criticality control. So they either have to figure out a way to remove those pieces before they go to the canyon, or we have to figure out a way to put a basket inside the canyon dissolvers to remove the pieces after they've been dissolved. The rest of the fuel's been dissolved. None of that has been evaluated. That's just thoughts for the future if we had to do something with that fuel. So in summary, our fuel station storage, we've got some S&F processing occurring in H Canyon. We need a decision on the future of what doesn't get processed, because right now we only have up to 1,000. You saw we have 2,906 bundles already in the basin, so we're only going to do 1/3 of the material. So we need a decision on the other 2/3 of the material. And the options are dry storage or some way of processing or removing those stainless and zirc pieces. And that's all I have. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I don't understand why the amended record of decision was limited to 1,000 bundles and not the whole inventory. I understand you may not have the money to process all 2,902 bundles at this time, but why not do the NEPA for the whole thing now?
At the time that the decision was made, we needed that 1,000 bundles to not have to install racks in L area, which is a costly endeavor. We'd have to do some re-racking and movement of fuel in order to put new racks in. It was actually more cost effective to process the 1,000 bundles, which would give us all that we needed in projections for FRR and DRR space. So that's why it was limited to 1,000. And because we're already at capacity for the hyper cores, they evaluated how much we had plus how much hyper had at the time, and that's how they came up with about 200 cores for hyper. So it was a step, kind of like a baby step approach. Get this done, see if it works, and then the department can look in where we are at that time and make a decision if we need to go forward or not.
You mentioned the options for processing the stainless and zircon alloy fuels. You didn't mention the option of shipping it to Idaho like was intended.
Right now, that option is suspended. There are issues at Idaho with their BAT agreement, so they're not allowed to ship anything in or out, or anything in to their state. So that option has been suspended at the time. It is an option we keep on our books for evaluation, but right now it's been suspended.
Can you elaborate on what the issue is with it?
The BAT agreement required them to have, and I'm not going to know all of the right acronyms for their facilities, but they had a treatment facility. They didn't meet that milestone, and so now they're not allowed to receive the fuel. That includes the FRR fuel that they received, because they received trigger fuel, which is a stainless zirconium cladded fuel from research reactors under the FRR program.
So are we receiving aluminum clad fuel from Idaho?
No.
Why not?
I don't see how it's equitable that you take fuel from Idaho, but Idaho doesn't take fuel from the state of South Carolina. So I don't think the department is willing to go down that path at this time. There may be a time in the future when it is more viable to go down that path, but at this time, the department is not willing to ask South Carolina to take on that added burden.
So it's a policy decision.
You gotta remember, they don't provide money to run anything. Everything you bring in South Carolina, you can stay here unless the money is provided to process.
I understand.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. Maxine, thank you. On page 7, sorry if I missed this. If you could just go over where the 4 foreign research reactor casts were from and the 3 domestic.
The domestics are going to be from MIT and MUR, which is in Massachusetts and I always get Missouri, thank you.
Right.
That's the domestic. The FRR, we've got one from Basel, which is Switzerland, one from Berlin, which is in Germany, and then we have some from Canada as well.
Jamaica.
And Jamaica, yes, sir.
So something came in from Canada.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. And on the, you touched on dry cask, and you've given presentations on this in the past. Is there anything ongoing with any dry cask research or?
We've not had any funding to support any of our dry cask work, because there's research that's needed for the aluminum. Commercial dries all the time because of the stainless and the zirc. With aluminum, the aluminum will hide the water molecules. And if you leave the water molecules in there, it has a potential for the hydrogen to build up. So you could have a potential for an explosive material inside of the cask. So there's a lot of research that needs to be done on how long you have to dry aluminum clad fuel and how fast you dry it. Because if you dry it too fast, you could generate hydrides, which will just basically deteriorate the fuel faster than you would want it to be.
And just a comment, it was mentioned it's not equitable for South Carolina to receive fuel if there's nothing going back to Idaho. And I would just add, and this is not necessarily in the purview of this CAB at this moment, but it's also not equitable to receive plutonium oxide, weapons-grade plutonium oxide from Los Alamos into South Carolina when the fate of the plutonium disposition program is totally up in the air. It hasn't happened, but I think it's something the CAB should pay attention to if there were any shipments coming into South Carolina, because the way things are now, with a chaos in the MOX project, and I think it's really going down. There's.
Mr. Chair, he may want to save that for public comment time, so you can elaborate on it.
Well, that's really all I had to say, but just keep an eye out on plutonium coming in, and I don't think it's going to happen. Thank you.
Yes, Fred?
Is the public allowed to comment at this point, or are we being held to a public comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. We've been over this before, but the flood studies you did to,
For the concrete?
yeah, the concrete flood studies, that's what you're basing the assumption that the L Basin will be good for 50 years.
That's one of the things that we have to do, to meet the requirements from the SRNL study that was done. So what Rose is referring to is when the ARRA program was in place, they were actually closing the sea basins. So they evaporated the water and they were going to grout it in place, which they did. Before they did that, we took concrete core samples, which went into the core and the rebar. Because C and L were built at the same time and had the same concrete recipe, we had those core analyses analyzed. The analysis came back and basically said the concrete was stronger than it was originally designed to be, and that it's only getting stronger as we go forward. That's one of the things. There's a lot of other activities that we have to do to maintain that ability to keep the basin alive 50 years more. And that, a lot of that has to do with our water quality. A lot of it has to do with our fuel integrity program. Fuel out of the bundles, take a look at it on a table that has measurements and guides so that you can make sure if you look at it this year, you bring it back next year, it hasn't degraded in any way, shape, or form. They haven't had that capability in the past. They have looked at fuel in the past, but it's one person's eye versus another, so you don't have a lot of basis. This is now set up to give us the basis. It'll be hooked up with cameras and video so that you can go back and see what they saw a year ago compared to what you're seeing now. So we hope to put that in this year.
The 50-year benchmark may be a problem. Now that I have so much extra time on my hands, I've been doing a bit of reading in the Federal Register. And back in 2010, when there was all the flap over Yucca Mountain, and NRC was appearing before Congress a lot to provide opinions on the safety and disposition of nuclear waste, they determined that without the societal acceptance of a repository anywhere, that it's never going to happen, that there has to be some program to assure that there is some societal and political acceptance of a program. Well, that follows then that there has to be some sort of program by DOE to sell the idea that somebody wants this in their backyard. NRC reported at the time in the Federal Register that it would, they assume there's not going to be, a repository will not be available until 25 to 35 years after the resolution of the political and societal issue associated with the repository. If you have 50 years of flex for L Basin and the 2013 Department of Energy strategy for managing nuclear waste and spent nuclear fuel said that they assumed there would be a repository available in the year 2048. That also says that there has to be some ongoing program now for societal and political acceptance. So the committee should be asking DOE, what is that program? What's going on? Because nothing's going to go forward until that program is a fait accompli. And you're going to run out of your 50-year safety parameter for L Basin before that.
And you're correct with the dates. What the SRNL study said was at least an additional 50 years. So I think the closer we get, we'll have to go do another study to see how long the basin could last past that time. So we've done the evaluation that says it's good for now. In the future, before we get to that 50-year mark, we'll have to do another evaluation. And because we're continuing to do those monitoring activities, we can tell if there's a degradation in our activities, either in the fuel or in the concrete, as we go forward. So that would give us an indication to move faster if we needed to, if we were seeing those signs of degradation. But we will have.
And when you say move faster, you mean alternatives like dry cask or maybe even beefed up processing in H Canyon. But still, it's all based on ultimately whether or not they can sell this to some neighborhood or neighborhoods. So I strongly recommend that the CAB ask DOE, what are they doing about that part of the ultimate disposition program?
And in the past, we have had that group come and give an update on where they stand. So that's one of the things that's been done in the past. It's not an EM activity. I think it's an NE activity at this point. But we have had that group come and give a presentation before. So if the committee wants that, that's something we certainly could put on the work plan for next year.
Thank you, Maxine.
Could I ask another question that Tom Quince, I think is pertinent? Maxine, this may not be right up your alley, but because you mentioned H Canyon and transferring of the fuel and the reprocessing of the materials you listed, I've been kind of confused over this year, given the shutdowns and problems with H Canyon, and maybe last year there was a steam outage, I think. And some of the verb usage in some of the report presentations, what happens when you're in the middle of running some of the materials from the L basin and H Canyon goes down? And some of the materials in some phase of being reprocessed, or you're shifting casts or something. I'm very unclear on the impacts of particularly the recent shutdown and the one in February.
So if it were material that was in a cask and had not been taken out of the bundle, that would be probably shipped back to L area and await. It depends on what the action is that happens at H Canyon. So if it's something that takes H Canyon out of the picture, that material that was in a cask that hasn't been dissolved yet could go back to L area and be stored. If it's something that's already been dissolved in the canyon, we would have to work out a plan of attack of how we would move that material to a safer position in the canyon, whether if we had to put in extra equipment to make it move down and get through the processing, but we could not leave that material in the canyon as it is, because that would cause some undue safety that they've had an issue in the past.
And that has had to be done? Some of the material has had to be stored in some other...
It's not stored in, they would figure out a way to make it keep moving through the
solution, however it's being managed.
It had to go, if it was dissolved and had to go straight to the tank farm, we would find a pathway to get it straight to the tank farm, and just disregard that uranium at that time. So you wouldn't go through.
Has that happened?
I believe.
This last year and a half?
No, not this last year and a half. I know in the past that they have stopped operations and things were left in the tank. I don't know how long they were left in the tank. There's analysis that they'll have to do to determine how long things can stay in each position. So all of that would require a lot of safety analysis work to be done at the time, depending on the situation and what actually broke and wasn't working in the tank. Okay,
just one more question, if I might. Because of problems in the H Canyon, and you designed this new system, received the NRU fuel from Canada, has somebody analyzed what happens if H Canyon goes down again? But I guess across the board, how is that being built into planning for management of what's already approved to be reprocessed, plus the Canadian fuel? For example, could it sit in that transfer system for some period of time if H Canyon were to go down?
Okay, it wouldn't sit in the transfer system. It'd actually be moved into a bundle into L basin in the water with all the other fuel.
Okay.
It wouldn't stay in that system.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Maxine.
Larry, I
Yes.
also wanted to thank Maxine and her updates for bringing in Wyatt Clark to update us on the HB loan. And not putting it off to the full CAB meeting. I really appreciate her bringing in.
I can't take credit for that. Wyatt wanted to do that on his own accord, so.
Great. We appreciate it.
Okay, we're at, committee discussion now. I got things to bring up on our discussion.
Well, a member of the public suggested that we take a look at how societal acceptance of, some future repository is coming along. I suggest, I'm not advocating that we look into that at this point, but it might be something to put on the list of potential issues that we would want to look at in next year's work plan.
Larry, is that something you want to do? Put that on the work plan topic for next year, potential work plan?
I would like to put on our work plan for next year, plutonium disposal, options. And so we can see, we've had a lot of discussion over what, if there's going to be a repository, just the different options. What are the options?
I also had a question for the committee members if we wanted to follow up on this. Is there any interest in, for the work plan, of getting contractors to tell us what their workforce does as far as shift times? I think they could give us information like in their employment force, how many people are working an 8-hour shift or a 9-hour shift or 10-hour shift and for what length of time, and give us data on employees, information with that respect, as opposed to management and that sort of stuff. Is there any interest in just gathering information on that, or do we want to wait and see what they find out with their analysis of the situation?
By analysis of the situation, you mean the operational pause that's going on right now?
I think the operational pause will give us some insight on certain issues, but I think nothing would beat some actual data behind it. So whether that's average shift times or the way it's all broken out shift times. I know during the tour, I was kind of a little surprised that the one crane operator seemed like 12-hour shifts. Sounded very common.
Yeah.
And
I was really surprised.
as a member of the working public, I don't think that anyone does a great job when you're scheduled for a 12-hour shift, because I don't know if there's a study to prove it, but you sort of pace yourself if you're working more than 10 hours. You can get yourself in a whole lot of trouble. So I think not only just the shift information, but what would be available from any incident reporting. I don't know if that's been, I'm sure it's compiled. Personally wouldn't know how to get it publicly.
I'm wondering if they have enough, especially these crane operators, they're so specialized. If there are enough crane operators to fill 8-hour shifts as opposed to 12-hour shifts. Maybe there's a shortage of manpower. One other thing I wanted to bring up too, David, that we were talking about the younger workers as opposed to the older workers. The older workers are working off of 20-year-old technology that they learned when they were in college and at work and all. The younger workforce are working off of a newer technology. So I think there's almost there's not really a balance there, but there's a little more of a balance than just the old dog and new tricks type thing. So I did want to bring that up as a point.
Getting back to Jenny's suggestion, though, in terms of a topic for next year's work plan, do we want to add that to the list, to get a briefing or something of, information on, work hours and shift
I
work?
think it would be a good topic.
I've got a note here to put it, to request it in the operational clause information,
Be a good sign, probably looking at it anyway.
in December, if they can give it, if that's okay.
So you're saying you could add this to that topic?
Well, it would seem that it would be part of their talking point.
Yep.
If that was.
Michael, do you have that? Oh, we need a separate request on that, or?
My personal advice to you would be you probably look at separately, because I'm aware of the issues that were driving the root cause analysis. The root cause analysis is not done yet, and although those factors were looked at, I'm not aware that fatigue and things like that, big shifts played a significant role. It might very well. I'm not privy to some of the concerns.
And I'm thinking it's not really difficult. I mean, you just
You
push
can
the computer button.
how much you get in demographics, I think taking the action, asking the staff to go look at whether it can be rolled into the December briefing or considered as an action item for next year, I think they can work it either way, depending on how they operate those. So,
And so, Tony Polk, Department of Energy, one thing that, just a suggestion, if you're interested, there have been, over the course of years, any number of studies that have been done regarding shift work and human performance. The contractors and on-site employ a number of different shift rotations. And a lot of that has relied on that kind of information to help inform how those shifts might be structured and how they work. So you may consider gathering that information from a source as well too, to help inform.
I think that would be better as a breakout topic rather than combined with the root cause.
Yes, I agree.
There's some relational nexus there, but it's not significant.
And I think you'll find
I'm
that,
leaning towards a separate target, and I want the age of the worker included too. I'm
They
curious
can still
now.
target December if they like.
I can't do that.
I think you'll find a lot of the 24 7 days a week, 365 days a year industries around the continent are working 12-hour shifts now. I think the shift workers, I don't know the results, I mean, what you're asking for is good data. I mean,
Can
but I think
they
you'll find.
sub-analyze the data to show us how many of the over 45 workers, for example, is working a 12-hour shift? Because without doing the research, I could tell you there's a detrimental effect of a 12-hour shift on a 45-year, an older person. Promise you that.
And I can tell you right now that there's a lot of people in this room that are over 45 and are working on 12, 13, 14 hours today. So.
Well, I think you'll find that the guys that are doing the work, they love it, most of them, because they basically there's all kinds of shift schedules which you'll find out when you get into this. But in effect, they get a week's vacation every month, in one way or another. They're off 7 days. And when they work, that's what they're doing. They're working, but they like it. And, but get the information. I think you'll find it really.
And I don't want to exclude any category of workers. So, for example, Chernobyl, if I remember right, was caused by a janitor. So I don't want to exclude a worker from the analysis. Okay.
Type of worker, okay.
Any other comments, discussion?
I had one other question. Since we have all these talented people here, in airline transportation and airline employees, there is a law that protects against the number of hours that an airline person, that a pilot can work. Also in the laws relevant to train and conduct engineers, the drivers.
Bus drivers. Bus drivers.
That was the other one. So my question is, are there any laws pertinent to nuclear employees concerning their work shift?
If they're in the transportation realm, yes, there are logs and things that they keep on all of the drivers, so they don't exceed those requirements. I know. In terms of a nuclear worker in the facilities, I don't know. So they, it's not them.
And there's no subcategory of law for personnel that work more directly with radioactive materials.
I don't know, we'll have to find that out.
Not that I'm aware of, but we've taken an action to implement those. I'm sure I would have encountered in my naval career if
Yeah.
those kinds of laws existed.
I don't recall.
I remember working in 12-hour shifts.
You can't shut down a submarine.
Yeah, sure.
Any other discussion?
Public comment?
Yes, we're time for public comment, yeah.
Suggestion you guys might want to think about. Now, I support what's going on with the foreign fuel, domestic fuel coming in and working it off in HCAN. I think that's the right thing to do for the country, and it's got all kinds of benefits from it. But one thing I think the CAB might want to consider, because it sounds like, I might be reading too much into what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like headquarters is going to keep shipping material in until we fill up L Basin, and we'll work it off as money becomes available to run HCAN.
We only have permission right now to process the 1,000 bundles and the 200 hypercores.
Is that money driven, or?
No, that was based on space in L Basin. Those were both driven by space in L Basin, not in terms of money.
But I mean, I think the CAB might want to consider taking some kind of a position that says, hey, we should keep bringing stuff into the country, because again, that's the right thing to do. But we ought to make sure that DOE headquarters make some kind of a commitment that they're going to provide the money to work that stuff off. Because if they don't give you the money to run HCAN, it's going to sit in South Carolina forever. And there will be some kind of a tie as you bring it in. Maybe you can't do it this year, but get something that's committing that they're going to supply this money sometime down in one of these budgets in the not too distant future. It'll be able to be worked off. Because we don't want it sitting there. I mean, Rose raised our points about how long is L Basin going to last. But I don't think we want L Basin to be storing this stuff for the next 50 or 100 years, however long L Basin is, because that's not the right way to store that material. I mean, you gotta get it vitrified, get the stuff recovered, get the stuff, the waste that's gonna come from it. It will be a small incremental increase in the waste that you're gonna generate in liquid waste, but DWPF and vitrified, it's gonna be a lot safer in a vitrified form than it's gonna be in spent fuel or any place in between spent fuel and the vitrified form. And I know it's budget driven, we all know that, and the country's got budget problems, but make it a priority that some of the money should go to getting rid of this stuff, and not just having it sit there in the form. It's safe now, and it'll be safe for a long time, but sometime it's not gonna be safe, it just sits in water.
The kind of Dan Kaminsky CAB, it kind of brings up something that struck me looking at that, and after you were describing the annual inspections of the fuel, spent fuel, is there any sort of FIFO, first in, first out? Are we categorizing the stuff as it goes in, that this container is in excellent condition, this container, we should probably put it on the A list to have it
It's not
dissolved?
specifically like that. One of the things we had to do as part of the 50-year study was go through and do a corrosivity report. So all of the fuels have been ranked as which ones are most corrosive. Sorry. So we know which ones are bad actors if they're bad actors. Now, because we did the SRE was the most critical on that list. So we've taken care of that one. It's out of the basin. The others, based on the analysis that's been done, we have a work plan, and they were factored into the 1,000 bundles that were picked. We've got a list of the 1,000 bundles they want to process. It's more than just that was factored into that list. We also have to ensure that we can get enough ATU to get the 40 metric tons of LEU to TDA as well. So it's based, a couple of different factors go into how that list was determined. But that's one of the factors on the list.
Okay, and kind of mixing your concern with that. I had envisioned, and one of you two can correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of envisioned L Basin as merely the holding tank until it could be disposed of via H Canyon. So the comings and goings of fuel, I think, will always happen until that facility is either no longer needed or has exceeded its functional lifespan. And I think with the 50-year evaluation, it kind of says that fuel can come and go. We have a limited capacity, correct? I mean, there's not that many openings, so we can't really take on any more of significance. That really it should be coming and going. And like you said, it's the right thing to do to get it, as long as we're getting funding to get it through there.
H Canyon is the only functioning thing in the United States, and probably in the free world, that can handle this kind of stuff.
Right, but just the numbers, if we're gonna do 1,000 of these spent fuel canisters and you can only hold 3,000, you're turning over your inventory fairly well, so it kind of mitigates the corrosive aspects of how it's being stored, and as long as you're on top of that, it, at least from a layman's point of view, it looks like a very safe and effective way to get through the system. And the fact that L Basin is completely limited by capacity, in a sense, protects the state of South Carolina, because it can only take so much. It can't just sit out in the open or in some cask somewhere. So if H Canyon ever shut down, you can no longer do it, then yeah, we have a big stink on our hands that we can't allow any more fuel to be coming in if we can't get rid of it.
Most of the members of the CAB that are on the CAB today, before you were on the CAB, there was definite effort from headquarters ordinance to take H Canyon out of service.
That would make no sense to me.
Well, unfortunately, the right decisions were made to keep it running, but it was going to be similar with F Canyon, and now it's kind of a dead condition. And the intention, in my opinion, was that some people wanted to have H Canyon in a similar situation, but that would be the worst thing that could happen. Fortunately, the right thing to decide is to keep it running. We'd like to have more money to run it faster, to get rid of this stuff faster. But again, the real world is our limited amount of funds we got. I think the CAB want to make sure that the site gets its fair share of whatever money is available.
Absolutely.
Tom, I know you're waiting, but I just want to make a couple of comments on the back of Joe. When we strongly recommended to DOE and to Washington not to shut down H Canyon or to take it to a min-safe level, they pointed out so many solid reasons why they should not, including the fact that it is so old that if it's ever taken down, it will not be brought back up because it can't come back up to code. They actually were going to shut it down. And now you can see what the ramifications of that would have been. Not just the L Basin, which, by the way, all the studies remind us, including the National Lab presentation in 2014, that L Basin is interim storage, not disposition. So we have to have a way to disposition. And H Canyon isn't the only way. And we teeter on the brink of some pretty serious problems because Congress actually was going to shut down H Canyon, which is the only way to process that stuff. I'm sorry,
Tom. Tom Clements, Savannah Riverside Watch. 2 points. I wasn't going to say anything about the H Canyon issue, or L Basin, but I think the CAB needs to get a better understanding of what's coming in, and I need that as well. The material that just came in from Germany, well, first, there is a good argument for returning HEU fuel to the United States from nuclear non-proliferation perspective. Each individual amount of fuel from whatever country, there may be an argument against not doing it, but in the collective, getting HEU out of commerce and out of use in research reactors or naval submarines or wherever. There's an argument for that. So the question is, why is low enriched uranium fuel coming in? If basin capacity is an issue, why is Canada being allowed to ship low enriched uranium fuel? the German stuff that just came in is LEU. So if there's a basin capacity issue, obviously there's some kind of contracts that this material is going to come in, but if it's competing with HEU space, I would appreciate if the CAB would ask what LEU is coming in and what is the schedule and what impact it's going to have on basin capacity. From a nuclear non-proliferation perspective, there's really no reason for that stuff to come in. The countries that have it can deal with it along with their other commercial spent fuel and other stuff. And just on the plutonium issue, I appreciate that the recommendation or the request that the CAB get a briefing on plutonium disposition options. As I mentioned before, I think the MOX program is in worse chaos than it's ever been in. I'm getting some information from people at the project, and it's scary what's happening with the management and the spending of money. The CAB has been told that plutonium disposition, particularly on the MOX side, is none of your purview, but it was discussed tonight, and actually in some length, because the HV line is being used for the MOX program. This is one of the programs where there's an intersection between MOX and EM, because the HCAM is the EM facility. So you have been taken by DOE into the MOX program. I think you should follow through and find out what's going on with MOX, because when that goes down, there's going to be a lot of plutonium, 12.8 metric tons away at the site that's going to have to be dealt with. So I don't think you should accept that DOE tells you you don't look at MOX, because in fact you just looked at it tonight with HB line. And the HB line is being operated to produce plutonium oxide for advanced feedstock for the MOX program. And this is when it looked like MOX was going to have need for advanced feedstock. That stuff, if the MOX facility can be finished, which that is a huge question given all the problems, they would need that feedstock for 15 or 20 years. So is there really a need to operate HB line if it's for a dedicated project for alternate feedstock production? EM is being paid $20 million a year to produce feedstock, and Alan Gunter told you that they were going to go into, I think, 24/7 operations to catch up on production of the feedstock. I think the goal last year was 180 kilos of oxide. They produced 1, and they produced less than 10, and they should have produced, I don't know, I'm not looking at the figures, 350 kilos by now. But there's no need for it. EM is certainly satisfied to take a pure oxide. I understand this, if it's going to be disposed of as waste and have NNSA pay for it. But the operation of the HB line right now, there's absolutely no urgency at all, period. And I do think you need an overall briefing on plutonium disposition and how it interfaces with HB line, what's happening to all the plutonium and K area, the cans that have been opened and examined, and we're going to go to WIP. There are other ways to prepare oxide so it's not as pure. Maybe they are in the development stage of furnaces, for example. But I think you do need a better understanding. So I fully appreciate the discussion about you getting that briefing. Thank you.
Yes, sir. With all due respect to what everything you said was partially correct, but there's another side of the story. I mean, HB line is taking plutonium coming out of weapons that are coming from the treaty, not the treaty, but the agreement we have with Russia on the 50 metric ton. So HB line can be used, good weapons type plutonium, get it into a form, some of the ones he said, other forms of oxide. It can be disposed of, sending it to WIP and doing some other things. So HB line is not directly and only tied to MOX. It's tied to other ways that you can dispose of.
Tied to the alternative.
So, thank you.
Larry Powell?
Yes.
Oh, this is Marilyn Parsons. Could I make a public comment, please?
Yes, Marilyn, go ahead. Good to hear from you.
This is Marilyn. This is Marilyn Parsons from Bluffton, South Carolina, and for the record, I spent 6 years on the CAB. I would like to just make a comment about the online meetings. as a member of the public, we get an email and it says, you know, that tonight there are committee meetings and so on. And if you want to watch, you can go to YouTube. If you want to participate, there is an 803 number. Now, I wanted to participate, so I did dial the number. That is a long distance call for me. So instead of, if I had wanted, I have been online for an hour and 31 minutes. If I wanted to participate then, and didn't have a cell phone, I would be paying for an hour and 30 minutes of long distance. The audio at times is not very good, but this is the frustration for someone trying to participate from afar. The YouTube and the conference, I'm on this conference call, I'll call it, are not synced. So I'm watching the YouTube and then I'm listening on my cell phone because I needed to mute that in case if I wanted to talk at some point in time, I couldn't have that feedback. Very dissatisfying. In the past, I know that the Department of Energy has several software programs that they have used so that the public could participate. This YouTube, just if you wanted to watch it, it's not too bad. But if you want to really participate, you have to call this number, and for many people, it's a long distance number. And while I'm talking and you people are talking and I'm listening on my phone, it's not synced with what I'm seeing on YouTube. That's very frustrating. And I appreciate seeing Rose and Tom in the audience, and it's nice seeing other members of the CAB that I served with. Keep up the good work. And that's all.
Thank you, Marilyn. There's no way we can know that on our end without that kind of input. Thank you very much. James, did we not use Google Hangouts anymore?
We do. It streams through YouTube for the viewers. That's why you get a slight delay from conference call because that's live versus a live stream going through the internet, popping out. YouTube on the other end is a viewed recording essentially as it's happening.
How big of a delay is that?
It depends on the lag time that you have. In New Ellington, it's a little bit longer because it's Atlantic broadband, and so you're going to wind up with about 10 to 15 seconds. So if you're watching at the same time as listening, there can be a drop. There is the option to type in a question through the Q&A feature, but you know, if you don't want to participate that way, if you want to participate verbally, we do have the conference call.
I have a comment to follow on Marilyn. We had a discussion.
That may be why she can't hear, because the microphone's way up here.
We earlier had a discussion about the responsibility of the CAB or its structure to meet the goals that are officially stated about representing the public and giving the public the opportunity to participate in the ongoings of the CAB. And I pointed out at some point when I'd done a little research that where we presently hold our meetings represents about 2% of the population that we're supposed to be serving and allowing input into the CAB. Marilyn has pointed out that the alternative, which was touted to us, the plastic and the wires, doesn't work very well. So here we sit, and where 2% of the public can actually come to these meetings, and the percent that has to play with plastic and wires in order to come to the meetings isn't really well served. We need a better plan. Thank you.
Just curious, your 2% is defined as the city of New Ellington or the county?
The population overall of the area that the CAB is supposed to be representing.
So you're saying only 2%.
Yeah.
You're defining that 2% as the city of New Ellington?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else with public comment?
Well, Jeff thinks we should move to Bluffton.
I'm for that.
I'd like to make a comment if there aren't any other public comments to kind of address that last comment. The Strategic and Legacy Management Committee recently sponsored a recommendation for improving public participation, and the department provided us a response. Last night, that committee discussed the response that DOE had provided, and we will be making a recommendation to the full CAB at their next meeting in terms of whether to accept DOE's response. And it does involve having more meetings at different locations. Just thought I'd share that.
Well, we've discussed that at the executive meeting as well. And Jim Giusti has explained to us, it's all a funding issue. And they gave us several options. We haven't, I think it's in the form of a recommendation at this point now, but, yeah, we are working on that, Rose.
Good, I'm glad to hear it, because in reality, the amount of money that's allocated for the function of this committee is peanuts. They could easily afford to arrange so that we could move around the area and see that everybody has an opportunity to participate.
Thank you. Anything else? Make a motion, we adjourn.
Good.